After my wife Clara's funeral, I never mentioned the second house or the $600,000 she left me in a hidden trust. A week later, my son Brad said, "Start packing. Dad, the house is sold. Vanessa needs the money for her business." I smiled. I had already packed. But they were not my bags. They were the deeds to their own lives, and I was about to foreclose on their happiness. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to family who underestimated your worth. The rain beat against the stained glass windows of the Baptist church like a drummer who had lost his rhythm. I sat in the front pew, my black suit hanging a little loose on my frame. Grief is a diet that no one wants to go on, but I had lost 15 pounds in the 2 weeks since Clara took her last breath. I stared at the simple mahogany urn on the table surrounded by white lilies. Clara loved lilies. The pastor walked out. The service began. I sat there listening to the scriptures, but my mind was not on heaven. My mind was on war. They thought they had just captured a helpless old man. They thought they had just secured the deed to my house and the control of my pension. They did not know I had $600,000 in a secret property. They did not know that Ezekiel F. Freeman was a fiction, but the man sitting next to them was a fortress. During the eulogy, Vanessa leaned over to Brad and whispered loud enough for me to hear, "Call the realtor as soon as we leave. Tell her we have the signature. We can list it on Monday." I stared straight ahead at the cross on the altar. List it, I thought. Go ahead. Try to sell the house that I built with my own hands. Try to throw me away like a piece of trash. You are about to find out that the foundation of this family was never the money. It was Clara. And now that she is gone, the only thing left standing is me. Men in suits standing by the doors with bulges under their jackets. It was an underground casino, an illegal gambling den in the back of a warehouse in the industrial district. And there in the center of the frame, sitting at a high-stakes poker table, was Betty. She was not wearing the fur coat. She was wearing a sequined dress that was too tight. She had a cigarette dangling from her lips and a stack of chips in front of her that was worth more than my truck. Betty gasped. She took a step back, her hand flying to her mouth. "Where did you get that?" she whispered. "I have friends in low places, Betty," I said. "I built that warehouse in '82. I know the owner." On the screen, Betty pushed all her chips into the center of the table. She was laughing. She was drunk. She looked invincible. The dealer turned the cards. Betty lost. She slammed her fist on the table. She reached into her purse. She pulled out a thick envelope. She dumped it on the table. Bundles of cash. Wrapped in bank bands. "Pause," I said, pressing the button. The image froze on the cash. "Zoom in," I said to the empty room, though it was just me controlling the tech. I used the digital zoom. The image pixelated, but the text on the bank bands was legible. Structural Dynamics, LLC. The room was silent. Betty was trembling. Her face had gone the color of old ash. "That is $500,000, Betty," I said. "In one night. $500,000 that Vanessa embezzled from Brad Company. Money that Brad borrowed against my house. Money that was supposed to be for payroll, for materials, for the future of the family. It is a fake," Betty stammered. "It is a deep fake. You doctored it." "I have the forensic accounting to back it up," I said. "I have the withdrawal slips signed by Vanessa. I have the dates. And I have this video of you losing it all on a pair of jacks." I stood up. I walked toward her. She shrank back, hitting the wall. "You threatened to destroy my name," I said, my voice rising. "You threatened to accuse me of the most heinous crime a man can commit, while you were stealing the food out of your own grandchildren's mouths to feed a gambling addiction." I have a problem," Betty cried. "I am sick, Zeke. I need help." "You do not have a problem," I said. "You have a void where your soul should be." But I was not done. The gambling was just the appetizer. I had the main course waiting in the folder on the desk. I walked back to the desk. I picked up the manila folder. It was old. The paper was yellowed with age. It smelled of archives and secrets. I turned off the TV. The image of the casino faded to black. "Let us talk about the past, Betty," I said. "Since you are so fond of digging up history." Betty looked at the folder. Her eyes widened. She recognized it. Or maybe she just recognized the look of judgment in my eyes. "What is that?" she whispered. "This," I said, opening the folder, "is a birth certificate. From the Sacred Heart Hospital in Savannah, dated June 14th, 1990. Betty made a sound like a wounded animal. "No," she moaned. "No, you cannot have that." "It lists the mother as Elizabeth Ann Davis," I read. "That is you, Betty. But it does not list a father, and it does not list a child named Vanessa." I pulled out a second document, a transfer of custody form. It lists a male child. Thomas. Betty slid down the wall. Her legs gave out. She sat on the hotel carpet, her fur coat billowing around her like a shroud. "You sold him," I said. My voice was cold, devoid of pity. "You were 25 years old. You had a gambling debt even then. You sold your own son to a broker for $10,000. "Please," Betty sobbed, burying her face in her hands. "Please, Zeke. Nobody knows. Vanessa does not know. If she finds out, she will kill me." "She thinks she is an only child," I said. "She thinks you are a saint who sacrificed everything for her. She does not know she had a brother. She does not know you traded his life to pay off a bookie." I watched her weep. I watched the tears streak her expensive makeup. I felt nothing, no satisfaction, no joy, just a grim validation of everything I had suspected. This woman was the root. Vanessa was just the fruit. The rot started here. "I kept him safe," Betty wailed, looking up at me, her eyes pleading. "I gave him a better life. I could not afford him." "You sold him like a used car," I said. "And 30 years later you tried to sell me. You tried to sell my dignity. You tried to sell my freedom." I closed the folder. "Here is the new deal, Betty," I said. She looked up, hope flaring in her eyes. "Anything, Zeke. Anything. Just do not tell Vanessa. Do not release the video. I will go away. I will disappear." "You are going to be a witness," I said. What she asked, confused. "You are going to testify," I said, "against Vanessa. You are going to tell the court about the embezzlement. You are going to tell the court about the plan to frame me. You are going to tell them about Ray." I can't," Betty stammered. "She is my daughter. She is your partner in crime," I corrected. "And right now the ship is sinking. There is only one life raft, Betty, and I am holding the rope." I held up the folder. "You testify and this folder stays closed. Thomas stays a secret. You go to rehab. You might avoid prison time for the fraud if you cooperate." "And if I don't," she whispered. "If you don't," I said, "I give this folder to Vanessa. I give the video to the district attorney. And I give the story about the sexual assault allegations to the press along with the proof that you fabricated them. You will lose your daughter. You will lose your freedom. And you will die alone in a cell known as the woman who sold her son." Betty looked at me. She saw the engineer. She saw the man who calculated loads and stresses. She saw that I had found her breaking point. She crawled toward me. She actually crawled on her hands and knees across the hotel carpet. She reached for my hand. "I will do it," she sobbed. "I will do whatever you say. Just please, save me." I pulled my hand away. I did not want her touch. "Get up," I said. "You are staining the carpet." She scrambled to her feet, wiping her face, trying to regain some shred of dignity, but it was gone. "You will meet with my lawyer tomorrow morning," I said. "You will sign a sworn affidavit, and then you will wait for the trial." "Yes," she said. "Yes, Zeke. Tomorrow." She turned to the door. She opened it. She looked back at me one last time. Her eyes were hollow. "You are a cruel man, Zeke," she whispered. I looked at the TV screen where the image of her gambling away her family future was burned into the pixels. "I am not cruel, Betty," I said. "I am just the consequences of your actions finally catching up to you." She left. I locked the door. I sat down on the bed. My hip was screaming. My head was pounding. I had won. I had turned the mother against the daughter. I had secured the testimony that would bury Vanessa. But as I sat there in the silence of the hotel room, I did not feel like a winner. I felt like a man who had just waded through a sewer. I picked up the phone. I called Keisha. "We got her," I said. "Is she on board?" Keisha asked. "She is on board," I said. She had no choice. "Good," Keisha said. "Then we are ready for the finale." I hung up. I lay back on the pillows. I thought about the baby. Thomas. The boy who was sold for $10,000. I wondered where he was. I wondered if he had a good life. I hoped he did. I hoped he was far away from the poison of his bloodline. I closed my eyes. It was almost over. Just a few more days, just a few more lies to unravel, and then I could finally rest. The glow of the laptop screen was the only light in my hotel room. It painted my face in ghostly shades of blue and white. It was 11:30 at night. I sat in the ergonomic chair, my back stiff, my eyes burning, but I could not look away. On the screen, the feed from camera 4 was broadcasting the finale of the tragedy I had predicted 18 years ago. The camera hidden behind the vanity mirror in the master bedroom had a wide angle. It caught the hallway door. It caught the expensive Egyptian cotton sheets. It caught the fear that was currently suffocating the room. Downstairs, I could hear the pounding. It was not a knock. It was an assault on the front door. Through the audio feed of the living room camera, I heard wood splintering. Ray Miller had arrived, and he had not come for tea. I watched on the split screen. In the living room, the front door flew open. Ray stumbled in. He looked worse than he had at the bar. His shirt was unbuttoned halfway down his chest. His hair was wild. His eyes were wide and frantic, the pupils blown out like saucers. He was high. High on adrenaline, high on whatever chemical courage he had snorted in the parking lot, and high on the righteous indignation of a thief who thinks he has been robbed. Vanessa ran into the living room. She was wearing a silk nightgown, clutching it to her chest. "Ray," she hissed, looking toward the stairs. "What are you doing here? You cannot be here." "Brad is upstairs." Ray laughed. It was a loud, ugly sound that bounced off the vaulted ceilings I had framed myself. "Screw Brad!" Ray yelled. "I do not care about Brad. I care about my money, Vanessa. Where is my money?" He walked toward her unsteadily, knocking over a vase of fresh hydrangeas. The glass shattered on the hardwood floor. Water pooled around his boots. Vanessa stepped back, her bare feet crunching on the glass. "Keep your voice down," she whispered frantically. "We talked about this. You get paid when the old man signs, or when he dies." Ray grabbed her by the shoulders. He shook her. "You are lying to me, Nessie. I saw the tickets. And I am made of reinforced concrete." I did not cry for the rest of the service. I saved my tears for the night when I would be alone in the house they were planning to sell. Right now, I had to be strong. I had to be cunning. Clara had given me a hammer, and I was going to use it to smash their greedy little plans into dust. As we walked out of the church into the gray afternoon, Brad put his arm around me. "You can ride with us, Dad," he said. "We will take you home." "No," I said, pulling away. "I drove myself. I will drive myself home." "But Dad—" "You are upset," Vanessa said. "You should not be driving." "I am not upset," I said, opening the door to my 1990 Ford pickup truck. "I am clarifying." Clarifying what Brad asked, confused. "My vision," I said. I started the engine. It roared to life, a sound of power and reliability. I drove away, leaving them standing on the curb. In the rearview mirror, I saw Vanessa pulling her phone out, dialing a number. She was calling the realtor. Let them call. "I know you are leaving. You are taking the boys. You are taking the cash. And you are leaving me here to rot." I watched from my hotel room. I took a sip of water. The glass felt cool in my hand. This was it, the implosion. Vanessa tried to push him away. "Ray, stop it. You are drunk. We can talk about this tomorrow." "I want my cut now," Ray screamed. "I did my part. I gave you the kids. I stayed away. I let that old fool play daddy for 18 years. I earned that money." At the top of the stairs, a shadow appeared. It was Brad, my son. He was wearing his pajamas, looking soft and confused. He rubbed his eyes. "Vanessa," he called out, his voice trembling. "Who is down there? What is going on?" Ray looked up. He saw Brad. A cruel smile spread across his face. "Well, well, well," Ray said, pushing Vanessa aside. "If it isn't the husband. Come on down, Brad. We are having a family reunion." Brad walked down the stairs slowly. He looked at Ray. He looked at the broken glass. He looked at Vanessa, who was pale and shaking. "Who is this?" Brad asked. "Vanessa, do you know him?" Ray laughed again. "Do I know her? Buddy, I knew her before you even learned how to tie your shoes. I knew her in every biblical sense of the word." Ray Brad stammered. "The Ray. The guy from before. The guy from always." Ray corrected. "The guy who gave you your family." Brad looked at Vanessa. "Honey, what is he talking about?" Vanessa stepped between them. "Brad, go back upstairs. He is crazy. He is just a stalker. I will call the police." "Call them." Ray dared her. "Call them. Let us tell them about the DNA test. Let us tell them about Dante and Darius. Brad froze. He looked at Ray. He looked at the height, the jawline, the eyes. He looked at the man standing in his living room, and he saw the reflection of the sons he thought were his. The realization hit him. I saw it happen on the grainy screen. His shoulders slumped. His face went slack. The denial he had been clinging to for 18 years finally shattered under the weight of the truth. "They are not mine," Brad whispered. Ray sneered. "Of course they aren't yours. Look at you. You are weak. You could never make boys like that. I made them. Vanessa and I made them. You just paid for them." He walked over to the mantelpiece where a framed photo of the twins sat. He picked it up. He looked at it. Then he threw it against the wall. "I want my money!" Ray roared, turning back to Vanessa. "$3 million. Half. Right now. Or I burn this whole house down." I expected Brad to fight. I expected him to defend his home. I expected him to defend his honor. I expected him to punch Ray Miller in the jaw. I leaned forward in my chair, willing my son to be a man, just for once, just for 1 second. "Hit him, Brad," I whispered to the screen. "Throw him out." But Brad did not hit him. Brad started to cry. "Please," he whimpered, putting his hands up in surrender. "Please, Ray." "Keep your voice down. The neighbors will hear." I felt a wave of nausea so strong I almost vomited. My son was not angry about the betrayal. He was not angry about the theft of his life. He was worried about the noise complaint. "We can work this out," Brad pleaded, tears running down his face. Just calm down. Do not ruin our reputation. I have a reputation in this town." "Reputation," Ray spat. "You are a cuckold, Brad. Everyone knows it but you." Ray picked up a lamp. He swung it, smashing it into the flat-screen television. Sparks flew. "Pay me!" he screamed. Vanessa was sobbing now, huddled in the corner. "I don't have it, Ray." Zeke froze the accounts. "Then get it from him," Ray yelled. "Kill him." "I don't care." I picked up my phone. It was time. I dialed 911. "Address 4200 Oak Street," I said calmly. "Intruder. Violent. He is destroying the property. He is armed." I hung up. On the screen, Ray was tearing the living room apart. He flipped the coffee table. He ripped the curtains down. Brad was on his knees begging, "Ray, please take whatever you want. Just go. Take the car keys. Take my watch. Just please stop yelling." It was the most pathetic thing I had ever seen. My legacy, my bloodline, reduced to a weeping coward begging a con man to be quiet. I switched the view to the exterior camera. Blue lights, silent, fast. The police were not knocking this time. They swarmed the porch. They kicked the door in. Ray turned around holding a piece of a broken chair like a club. He was high. He was paranoid. He did not drop it. "Police dropped the weapon," the officers screamed. Ray did not drop it. He swung. The taser hit him in the chest. Ray convulsed. He went down hard, twitching on the floor amidst the shards of glass and the ruins of my living room. The officers were on him in seconds, cuffs clicking into place. They dragged him up. Ray was screaming now. Screaming the truth for the body cameras, for the neighbors gathered on the lawn for the world to hear. "Ask her," he screamed, pointing at Vanessa. "Ask her about the twins. They are mine. Ask her about the insurance fraud. She tried to kill the old man. She tried to kill Zeke Freeman." The officers looked at Vanessa. She was pressed against the wall, pale as a sheet. Brad was still on the floor, sobbing into his hands. Ray looked at Brad. "You are a joke," Ray spat as they dragged him out the door. "You raised my kids and you thanked me for it." The door closed. The house was suddenly quiet except for the sound of Brad weeping. I saved the video file. I backed it up to 3 different servers. Then I opened my email. I typed in the address of the CEO of the engineering firm where Brad worked. The man who prided himself on family values and integrity. Subject regarding Brad Freeman. I attached the video file. I wrote a short message. "This is the character of the man handling your accounts. He is comprised, he is vulnerable to blackmail, and he lacks the spine to stand up for his own home. Do with this what you will." I hit send. I watched the screen for a moment longer. Vanessa was trying to touch Brad's shoulder. Brad flinched away from her, crawling backward across the floor like a crab. He looked at her with terror. He looked at the broken room. He stood up shakily. He looked directly at the camera hidden in the smoke detector. He did not know it was there, but he looked right at it. "Dad," he whispered. "Dad, help me." I reached out and turned off the monitor. The screen went black. "I am helping you, son," I said to the dark room. "I am teaching you that you cannot build a life on a foundation of sand. You have to let it collapse. You have to clear the rubble. And then, if you are strong enough, you build again." But looking at the man sobbing on the floor, I knew he would never build again. He was done. I stood up. My hip hurt, but it was a good hurt. It was the hurt of a job finished. Ray was in custody. The truth was out. The family was broken. Now it was time for the final demolition. The tuition check bounced on a Tuesday morning. It was a digital transaction, a series of zeros and ones traveling through the fiber optic cables of the banking system. But when it hit the frozen wall of my assets, it made a sound loud enough to shatter the entitlement of two 18-year-old boys. I was not there to see it, but I knew the schedule. I knew that at 10 o'clock, the dean of students at St. Jude Preparatory Academy would walk into AP History. I knew he would ask Dante and Darius to gather their things. And I knew he would walk them out the front door, not as students, but as trespassers. For 12 years, I had paid $40,000 a year for them to learn Latin and physics. I had paid for the uniforms, the trips to Europe, the lacrosse equipment. I had paid so they could stand on a foundation of privilege I never had. But a foundation requires maintenance, and Brad had stopped doing the maintenance the moment he thought he could sell the land underneath it. I sat in my hotel room watching the feed from the living room camera. It was 2 in the afternoon. The front door of the house on Oak Street flew open. Dante and Darius stormed in. They were still wearing their blazers, but their ties were loosened and their faces were flushed with the particular humiliation of the rich who have just been told they are poor. They looked frantic. They looked like children who had been promised a trip to Disneyland only to be dropped off at a landfill. "Mom," Dante yelled, throwing his backpack onto the floor. "Mom, where are you?" Vanessa appeared from the kitchen. She looked like a woman who had been dragged through a hurricane. Her hair was unwashed. She was wearing a bathrobe at 2 in the afternoon. She held a glass of wine in one hand and a stack of legal notices in the other. Her eyes were red-rimmed and wild. The stress of Ray, arrest the frozen accounts, and the pending investigation had stripped away her veneer of calm sophistication. "What are you screaming about?" Vanessa snapped, taking a large gulp of wine. "I am on the phone with the lawyer. Keep it down. They kicked us out," Darius shouted, his voice cracking. "The dean pulled us out of class. He said the tuition is 3 months overdue. He said the check for the spring semester bounced. He said we cannot come back until it is paid in full." Vanessa waved her hand dismissively. "It is a banking error. I will handle it tomorrow." "Tomorrow?" Dante screamed. "They escorted us off campus, Mom. In front of everyone, in front of the lacrosse team. They emptied our lockers. We look like losers. You have to pay them. Right now. Write a check. Let them plan." I reached into my pocket and touched the cold metal of the key Clara had left me. The game had started, and they did not even know I was playing. 3 days. That is how long it took for the vultures to circle. It was Friday morning. The house on Oak Street was quiet, a heavy silence that had settled in the corners since Clara's funeral. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, the one Clara had reupholstered herself 5 years ago with a floral fabric I pretended to hate, but secretly loved because it smelled like her perfume. I was drinking coffee black, watching the dust motes dance in the shaft of sunlight, thinking about how a house feels different when half of its soul is gone. I had built this house. I had framed the walls. I had laid the hardwood floors where my son learned to walk. Now without her it felt less like a home and more like a museum of memories I was the sole curator of. The front door opened without a knock. "Pay them with what?" Vanessa screamed back, her voice rising to a shriek that distorted the microphone on my camera. She threw the stack of papers at them. They fluttered to the floor like dead leaves. "Look at this," she yelled. "Foreclosure notice, repossession order for the Mercedes, legal fees for your father, incompetent defense attorney. The accounts are frozen, you idiots." Zeke froze everything. "But you said we were rich," Darius said, his voice trembling. "You said we had millions. You said Grandpa was just holding it for us." "I said a lot of things," Vanessa spat. "But right now, the reality is that we are broke. Your father is a useless coward crying in the guest room, and I am the only one trying to keep us out of prison. So fix it," Dante demanded, taking a step toward her. He was used to demanding. He was used to getting. "Sell something. Sell the jewelry. Just get us back in school." Vanessa laughed. It was that same dry, rattling laugh her mother used. "You want me to fix it?" she said, stepping into his space, her face twisted with contempt. "You want me to wave a magic wand? Well, guess what, boys? The magic is gone." And you know what else? I am tired of carrying you. She poked Dante in the chest with a manicured finger. You are 18, she hissed. You are men, supposedly. Why do you not go get a job? Why do you not contribute something to this family instead of just sucking us dry? A job. Dante recoiled, as if she had suggested he eat poison. We have exams. We have futures. Your future is cancelled, Vanessa yelled. You are useless, both of you. You are just like your father. Weak, entitled, leeches. Get out of my face. Go find Ray if you want money. Oh wait, Ray is in jail because he could not keep his mouth shut either. She turned and stormed back into the kitchen, slamming the door so hard the walls shook. The twins stood there in the wreckage of the living room. The silence was heavy, suffocating. They looked at each other. For the first time in their lives, the safety net was gone. The parents who had promised them the world were revealed to be frauds. Dante kicked the sofa. He paced around the room, running his hands through his hair. This is insane, he muttered. This cannot be happening. Darius was quieter. He was looking at the papers on the floor. He bent down and picked one up. Then he walked over to the side table where Vanessa had left her purse and her personal planner. What are you doing? Dante asked. Looking for answers, Darius said. He opened the leather-bound planner. Vanessa was old school. She wrote things down. She kept a diary of sorts mixed in with her appointments and her schemes. Darius flipped through the pages. He stopped. He read something. His face went pale. Dante, come look at this, he whispered. Dante walked over. What is it? Darius pointed to a page dated 3 months ago. I zoomed in with the camera, but the resolution wasn't high enough to read the handwriting. But I didn't need to read it. I knew Vanessa. I knew her heart. Read it, Darius said, his voice shaking. Dante read aloud. His voice was quiet at first, then it grew louder, filled with a dawning horror. The twins are becoming expensive. Tuition, cars, insurance. It never ends. They are heavy luggage. As soon as the old man kicks the bucket and the trust clears, I am leaving them. I will give them $5,000 each and tell them to figure it out. I am going to Paris alone. Or maybe with Ray if he behaves. But I am not spending my prime years mothering 2 grown men who aren't even smart enough to know their own history. They are a means to an end. Once I have the check, the luggage gets left at the station. Dante stopped reading. He stared at the page. She called us luggage, he whispered. She was going to leave us, Darius said, tears welling up in his eyes. She was going to take the money and run. She never cared about us. It was all a lie. The cars, the clothes. It was just to keep us on her side against Grandpa, Grandpa Dante said. The word hung in the air. They looked at each other. And in that moment, I saw the facade crack. The arrogance, the entitlement, the hatred, it all crumbled away, leaving 2 scared boys who had just realized they were orphans with living parents. Grandpa never asked for anything, Darius said softly. He just came to the games. He helped me with my calculus. He built the tree house. He drove that old truck, Dante added. He wore those old boots. We made fun of him. We called him cheap. But he paid for everything Darius said. The school, the house, the food. He paid for it all. And he never called us luggage. They looked at the photo of Ray Miller that was still lying on the floor from the night before. The glass was broken. Ray's face was distorted. That is our father, Dante said, kicking the frame. A con man. And our mother is a thief. Grandpa tried to warn us, Darius said, at the school, on our birthday. He tried to give us the watches, he tried to talk to us, and we called security. I watched them. I watched the regret wash over them like a cold tide. It was satisfying, but it was also tragic. They were learning the lesson too late. They were learning the value of water only after the well had run dry. We have to find him, Dante said. We have to apologize. We have to tell him we didn't know. He is at the shack, Darius said. Mom said he was living in that shack in the bottoms. 4,200 Maple Drive. Let us go, Dante said. Maybe he will take us back. Maybe he can fix this. They ran out of the house. They did not take the Range Rovers. They did not have the keys anymore. Vanessa had hidden them, or maybe the repo man had already come. They ran down the street toward the bus stop. I switched off the monitor. I packed my laptop. I put on my coat. I drove to 4,200 Maple Drive. I did not go inside. I parked my truck down the block, hidden in the shadows of an abandoned warehouse. I waited. An hour later, I saw them. They were walking. They must have taken the bus as far as it went and walked the rest. Their fancy loafers were covered in mud. Their blazers were wet from the drizzle that had started to fall. They looked out of place like exotic birds lost in a landfill. They walked up to the shack. The door was padlocked. The windows were dark. The sign I had placed in the yard earlier that morning was leaning crookedly against the peeling siding. Condemned. Dante ran up the steps. He pounded on the door. "Grandpa," he yelled. "Grandpa, are you there? It is us. It is Dante and Darius." Silence. Only the sound of the wind rattling the loose tin on the roof. "We are sorry," Darius yelled, his voice breaking. "We are so sorry. Please open the door. We brought the watches back. We didn't mean it." He sat down on the rotting steps and put his head in his hands. "He is gone," Dante said, looking through the dirty window into the empty room. "There is nothing in there, just trash." They sat there side by side on the porch of a ruin in the middle of a slum. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across their faces. They were cold, they were hungry, and for the first time in their lives they were completely and utterly alone. I watched them through the windshield of my truck. I remembered the day they were born. I remembered holding them in the hospital, my heart bursting with a love I thought would last forever. I remembered promising to protect them, to guide them, to give them the world. But I had given them the wrong world. I had given them a world of ease, and they had grown soft and rotten. I had shielded them from the truth, and the truth had festered. I put my hand on the key in the ignition. Part of me, the old Zeke the grandfather, wanted to start the truck, wanted to drive up there and open the door and take them to a diner and buy them a hot meal, wanted to tell them it was going to be okay. But the engineer in me knew better. You cannot fix a structural failure with a coat of paint. You cannot save people who only come to you when they have nowhere else to go. They were not here because they loved me. They were here because they were cold. They were here because the money was gone. They needed to freeze. They needed to feel the bite of the wind. They needed to understand that a man's actions have consequences that cannot be erased with a simple apology. They needed to become men, and the only way for them to do that was for me to stay dead to them. I turned the key. The engine rumbled. Dante looked up. He saw the truck in the distance. He stood up. He squinted. He waved his arms. "Hey, hey, help us." I did not turn on my lights. I put the truck in gear. I backed out of the alley. I drove away. I left them on the porch of the empty house. I left them in the cold. I drove toward the city lights, toward the future, toward the justice that was waiting in the courtroom. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. It was hot and salty. I let it fall. "Goodbye, boys," I whispered. "I hope you find your way. But you will not find it on my map." The courtroom was a theater, and Vanessa was the star of the show. She sat in the witness stand, dabbing at her eyes with a lace handkerchief that probably cost more than my first car. She looked fragile. She looked exhausted. She looked like a woman who had been pushed to the brink of madness by a tyrannical father-in-law. The jury was eating it up. I could see it in their faces. They saw a young mother trying to protect her children. They saw a grieving wife trying to hold her family together. They did not see the shark. Mrs. Freeman, her lawyer Miller, said, his voice soft and sympathetic, "Tell the court why you are seeking full guardianship over Ezekiel Freeman's estate. Why is it so important that you and your husband manage these assets?" Vanessa took a shaky breath. She looked at the jury. Her eyes were wide and luminous with unshed tears. There was no doorbell, no respectful pause, just the jingle of keys and the heavy thud of the oak door swinging back against the stopper. It was them, Brad and Vanessa. They swept into the living room with the energy of a demolition crew. Vanessa was wearing a sharp gray blazer and heels that clicked aggressively on the hardwood I had polished just yesterday. Brad trailed behind her, looking pale, his eyes darting around the room as if he were afraid the furniture might jump up and accuse him of something. Dad, Vanessa said, her voice bright and brittle like cheap glass. "Why are you sitting in the dark? We need to get some light in here." She marched over to the windows and ripped the curtains open. The sudden glare hurt my eyes. I did not move. I just wrapped my hands tighter around my mug. "Hello to you too, Vanessa," I said, my voice gravelly from disuse. Brad shuffled his feet. "Hey, Dad, how are you holding up?" "I am holding," I said. "It is for the boys," she whispered. "Dante and Darius, they are his grandchildren, his only grandchildren. Zeke Zeke has always said that everything he built was for them, that they were his legacy. But now he is squandering it. He is throwing it away on spite. He is letting the family home rot. He is cutting them off from their education. She looked at me then, a look of pure sorrow that chilled my blood. We just want to protect his legacy, she said. We want to make sure that the bloodline he worked so hard to support is taken care of. That is all Brad and I have ever wanted, to honor the family, to honor the Freeman name. Miller nodded solemnly. Thank you, Mrs. Freeman. No further questions. Vanessa began to rise, but the judge held up a hand. Cross-examination, Ms. Freeman. Keisha stood up. She did not walk to the lectern immediately. She stood at our table arranging her papers. She looked calm. She looked dangerous. She wore a suit the color of midnight blue and her hair was pulled back in tight braids. She looked like a warrior queen preparing for an execution. She picked up a single manila envelope. She walked to the witness stand. The click of her heels on the parquet floor was the only sound in the room. Mrs. Freeman Keisha began, her voice level and devoid of emotion. You speak very passionately about legacy, about the Freeman bloodline, about the rights of the grandchildren. Yes, Vanessa said, lifting her chin. It is the most important thing to Zeke, or it used to be before the dementia set in. Keisha nodded. So your claim to the estate, your request for guardianship, it is largely predicated on the fact that your sons Dante and Darius are the direct heirs of Ezekiel Freeman, that they are the future of this family. Of course, Vanessa snapped. They are his grandsons, his flesh and blood. And you would agree, Keisha continued pacing slowly in front of the jury box, that if they were not his flesh and blood, if they were, say, strangers, then your claim to the estate based on familial right would be significantly weaker. Miller stood up. Objection. Hypothetical. Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. I want to see where she is going with this. Vanessa scoffed. It is a ridiculous question. Everyone knows they are his grandsons. They look just like Brad. They have the Freeman temper. Keisha stopped pacing. She turned to face Vanessa. You are under oath, Mrs. Freeman. You are swearing before God and this court. Do you state categorically that Dante and Darius Freeman are the biological children of Bradley Freeman and the biological grandchildren of Ezekiel Freeman? Vanessa did not blink. She did not hesitate. She had told this lie for 18 years. It was not even a lie to her anymore. It was just the air she breathed. Yes, she said. Absolutely. Keisha smiled. It was a small, sad smile. Your Honor, Keisha said, turning to the bench, we would like to enter Defense Exhibit A into evidence. She handed the envelope to the bailiff. The bailiff took it to the judge. The judge opened it. He put on his reading glasses. He scanned the document. His eyebrows shot up. He looked at Vanessa. Then he looked at Brad. Then he looked at me. Admitted, the judge said, his voice tight. Keisha took a copy of the document and walked it over to Vanessa. She placed it on the railing of the witness stand. Mrs. Freeman, Keisha said, this is a DNA analysis report from the Gen-Tech laboratory in Atlanta. It compares the genetic markers of Dante Freeman and Darius Freeman against the genetic markers of Bradley Freeman. Vanessa went still. She did not look at the paper. She looked at Keisha. Her face was a mask of marble. We obtained these samples. Keisha continued, her voice rising so the back of the room could hear, pursuant to a court order granted in closed session last week based on probable cause of fraud. We used hair samples from the boys' brushes and a saliva sample from Brad's discarded coffee cup. She paused. She let the silence stretch until it was screaming. Mrs. Freeman, could you please read the conclusion at the bottom of page 2, highlighted in yellow? Vanessa did not move. She stared at Keisha with eyes that were black holes of hate. Read it! Mrs. Freeman, the judge ordered, his voice cracking like a whip. Vanessa looked down. Her hands were shaking so hard the paper rattled against the wood. She opened her mouth, but no sound came out. I cannot, she whispered. Then I will read it for the record, Keisha said, snatching the paper back. She turned to the jury. She held the paper up. The probability of paternity is 0%. Bradley Freeman is excluded as the biological father of Dante and Darius Freeman. The sound in the courtroom was not a gasp. It was a roar. It was the sound of air being sucked out of the room by a sudden vacuum. The jury looked at each other. The spectators began to murmur. Order! The judge banged his gavel. Order in the court. Keisha did not stop. She turned back to Vanessa. You lied, she said, her voice hard as granite. You lied for 18 years. You defrauded this family. You made my client support another man's children. You used the claim of bloodline to try and steal his estate. That is not just guardianship fraud, Mrs. Freeman. That is paternity fraud. That is theft by deception. And that is perjury. Vanessa was shaking her head back and forth, a mechanical motion of denial. No, she moaned. The test is wrong. It is a mistake. Keisha pulled another photo out of her file. Is this a mistake too? She asked, holding up the picture of Ray Miller. The picture of Ray and Vanessa on the boat. The picture of Ray mugshot side by side with Dante's graduation photo. The resemblance was undeniable. It was not a resemblance, it was a photocopy. We found the father, Keisha said. Ray Miller, your ex-boyfriend. The man whose rent you have been paying with stolen money. The man who is currently in police custody and has signed a sworn affidavit admitting to the conspiracy. Vanessa made a sound like a strangled cat. She looked at Miller, her lawyer. Do something, she shrieked. Stop her. Miller was packing his briefcase. He stood up. Your Honor. Miller set his face pale. I request a recess. I need to confer with my client regarding potential criminal exposure. I was not aware of these facts. He was abandoning ship. He knew a sinking vessel when he saw one. But the real tragedy was not happening on the stand. It was happening at the plaintiff table. I looked at Brad. My son. The boy I had raised. The boy I had protected. He was sitting in his chair, but he was not really there. His face was the color of old ash. His eyes were wide, unseeing, staring at a point in the middle distance. He was watching his entire life disintegrate. 18 years, every birthday, every Father's Day card, every moment of pride, every worry, every dollar, stolen. It was not just that his wife had cheated. It was that she had made him a cuckold for 2 decades and made him thank her for it. She had made him raise the spawn of the man she actually loved. Brad, I whispered across the aisle. He did not hear me. He started to make a sound, a low, keening sound deep in his throat. It was the sound of an animal that has been gutted. He stood up slowly. He looked at Vanessa. She was still on the stand, screaming at the judge, screaming at Keisha, trying to spin a web that had already been torn down. Brad looked at her, and then he looked at me. Dad, he mouthed. And then he fell. He did not faint. He collapsed. His legs simply stopped working. The structural integrity of his soul gave way. He hit the floor with a heavy, sickening thud. Brad, Vanessa screamed, jumping up from the stand. I moved faster than I had in 20 years. I forgot my cane. I forgot my hip. I was over the railing. I was on the floor next to him. Brad, I said, grabbing his shoulders. Son! He was conscious, but his eyes were rolling back. He was clutching his chest. Call a medic, I roared at the bailiff. I held him. I held the son who had tried to put me in a home. I held the son who had sold my house. Because in that moment he was not a conspirator. He was a victim. He was the biggest victim in the room. Vanessa tried to push past the bailiff to get to him. Get away from him, I snarled, looking up at her. She stopped. She saw the look on my face. It was not the look of a father-in-law. It was the look of an executioner. You killed him. I said, my voice low and terrible. You killed his soul. If he dies, I will hunt you to the ends of the earth. Vanessa recoiled. She looked around the room. Every eye was on her. The jury, the judge, the spectators. There was no sympathy left, only disgust. She was naked in her greed. The paramedics burst in. They pushed me aside. They started working on Brad. I stood up. I backed away. I felt Keisha hand on my arm, steadying me. Is he okay? She whispered. I don't know, I said, watching them load my son onto a stretcher. I don't think he will ever be okay. The judge banged his gavel again. The sound was distant like thunder in another county. This hearing is suspended, the judge announced, his voice grim. Mrs. Freeman, you are remanded into custody pending a hearing on perjury and fraud charges. Bailiff, take her into holding. Vanessa started to scream as the bailiff grabbed her wrists. No, she yelled, kicking and fighting. I have rights. I am a mother. You are a monster, I thought. I watched them drag her away. Why are you here? Vanessa turned from the window. She clasped her hands together, a gesture that meant she was about to deliver bad news disguised as a favor. We need to talk, Zeke, she said, about your living arrangements. I took a sip of coffee. It was cold. I am fine where I am. No, you are not, Vanessa countered, shaking her head as if speaking to a toddler. Look at this place. It is 4 bedrooms, 2,000 square feet. It is too much for one old man to maintain. The lawn, the gutters, the cleaning. It is a burden. It is my home, I said simply. It was your home, Vanessa corrected. Now it is an asset that is depreciating because you cannot take care of it. And frankly, Zeke, we cannot be running over here every time a light bulb burns out. I have never asked you to change a light bulb, I said. I changed the fuse box in this house myself last year. Brad stepped forward, wringing his hands. Dad, listen. We have been thinking. With Mom gone, you are going to get lonely. I watched them wheel Brad out. The courtroom emptied. I stood there in the silence. I had won. I had proven the fraud. I had saved my estate. But looking at the empty spot on the floor where my son had fallen, I realized the cost of the victory. I had saved the money, but I had lost the boy. I turned to Keisha. Let us go to the hospital, I said. We walked out. I leaned on my cane. It felt heavy. The truth felt heavy, but it was the only thing we had left. The courtroom air was heavy, not with humidity, but with the suffocating weight of impending doom. Brad had been wheeled out on a stretcher, an oxygen mask over his pale face, leaving a silence that felt like a vacuum waiting to be filled. Vanessa sat alone at the defense table now. Her lawyer Miller had moved his chair a few inches away from her, a subtle geographical shift that screamed. He knew he was sitting next to a sinking ship and didn't want to get sucked down by the vortex. The judge adjusted his glasses, his face a mask of stone. He looked at Keisha. Ms. Freeman, you indicated there was further evidence regarding the financial malfeasance. Proceed. Keisha stood up. She did not look tired. She looked like a blade that had just been sharpened. She walked to the center of the room holding a single blue folder. Your Honor, Keisha said, her voice cutting through the silence. We have established paternity fraud. We have established intent to deceive. But the defense would have you believe that Mrs. Freeman's actions were motivated by a misguided desire to protect the family legacy. She turned to look at Vanessa. Vanessa stared back, her eyes hard and dry. She was cornered, but she was not broken. Not yet. We would like to submit Defense Exhibit C, Keisha said, handing a sheaf of papers to the bailiff. These are transaction records from the First National Bank of the Cayman Islands. They were obtained through a subpoena facilitated by the federal investigation into the document forgery ring. Vanessa flinched. The Caymans. She thought that money was invisible. She thought it was safe. These records show a series of wire transfers Keisha continued dating back 6 months. The funds originated from the sale of the Oak Street property, which was executed via a fraudulent power of attorney, and from a high-interest private loan taken out in Bradley Freeman's name. She paused, letting the numbers sink in. The total amount transferred is $1.2 million. A murmur ran through the gallery. 1.2 million. It was a number that meant freedom. It was a number that meant a new life. And where is this money now? The judge asked, his voice tight. It is currently sitting in a shell account registered to VM Holdings, Keisha said. The signatories are Vanessa Freeman and Ray Miller. Vanessa stood up. That is a lie, she screamed, her composure finally cracking like cheap plaster. That is my money. I earned it. I managed this family for 20 years. That is my severance package. Severance package, Keisha repeated calmly. You stole the equity from your father-in-law home. You stole the future from your husband. And you were planning to run away with the father of your children. That is not severance, Mrs. Freeman. That is grand larceny. Sit down, Mrs. Freeman, the judge roared, banging his gavel. Vanessa sank back into her chair. She looked small now, defeated. She knew the money was gone. She knew the fraud charges would stick. She was doing the math in her head, calculating prison time, figuring out if she could cut a deal. But she did not know what was coming next. She thought this was about money. She thought the worst thing she had done was steal. Keisha walked back to our table. She picked up a flash drive. It was small, black, and unassuming. But I knew what was on it. I had watched the raw footage in the hotel room. I had listened to Ray Miller pour out his soul for 2 gold bars. But there was one part of the tape I had not seen. One part Keisha had held back, telling me I needed to see it with the rest of the world. She said I needed to see it when Vanessa could not look away. Your Honor, Keisha said, her voice dropping an octave, becoming somber. The financial crimes are extensive, but they are merely the symptom of a much darker pathology. We have one final piece of evidence, A video deposition from Mr. Ray Miller recorded yesterday in police custody. Miller, the lawyer, stood up. Objection, Your Honor. We have not viewed this evidence. This is trial by ambush. This is a competency hearing, Mr. Miller, the judge snapped. And given the gravity of the fraud exposed so far, I am inclined to hear whatever Ms. Freeman has to say. Play the tape. Keisha plugged the drive into the court projector. A large screen descended from the ceiling. The lights dimmed. Ray Miller's face appeared. He was sitting in an interrogation room wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked tired. He looked sober. He looked like a man who had realized that the only way out was through the truth. State your name, the off-screen detective said. Ray Miller. And do you understand that you are providing this statement under a plea agreement regarding the charges of conspiracy and fraud? I do, Ray said. Tell us about the plan, Ray. Tell us about the end game. Ray looked at the camera. He licked his lips. It was always about the money, he said. Vanessa. She likes nice things. But Zeke was tight. He held on to every penny. He wanted to leave it to the boys, but he was healthy. He was strong. He was going to live another 20 years. Ray paused. He looked down at his hands. Vanessa couldn't wait that long. She said she was tired of waiting. She said she was tired of changing his sheets and listening to his stories. She said we needed to speed things up. On the screen, the detective asked, speed things up, how? Ray took a deep breath. First it was Clara, he whispered. The room went cold. Ice cold. I felt my heart stop beating. Clara. My wife. My beautiful, strong Clara, who had died in her sleep 6 months ago. A heart attack, the doctor said. Natural causes. Clara was the gatekeeper. Ray continued. She watched the accounts. She watched the medicine. Vanessa couldn't get to Zeke while Clara was alive. So, she had to go first. I gripped the edge of the table. My knuckles turned white. I could not breathe. I could not think. I could only listen to the voice of the man on the screen dismantling my reality. How did she do it? The detective asked. Beta blockers, Ray said. Clara took pills for her blood pressure. Digoxin. Vanessa. She bought some stuff online. From a pharmacy in Mexico. It looked exactly the same. But it wasn't medicine. It was concentrated potassium. I gasped. A sound torn from the bottom of my lungs. Potassium. Too much potassium stops the heart. It looks like a heart attack. It is untraceable unless you are looking for it. She switched the bottles, Ray said, tears running down his face. She did it on a Tuesday. I told her not to. I told her it was too risky. But she laughed. She said old people die all the time. She said nobody would ask questions. He looked up at the camera, his eyes pleading for forgiveness I did not have to give. She gave Clara the pills with her morning tea. And that night, Clara didn't wake up. The screen went black. The silence in the courtroom was not the silence of peace. It was the silence of a tomb. It was the silence of 1,000 people holding their breath at the sight of a monster. I sat there frozen. I thought about that morning. I thought about finding Clara cold in our bed. I thought about Vanessa crying at the funeral, holding my hand, telling me it was God's will. It wasn't God. It was her. She had walked into my kitchen. She had brewed the tea. She had handed my wife the cup of death with a smile on her face. And she had watched her drink it. Slowly pain began to recede, replaced by a rage so pure, so hot it felt like I had swallowed a star. I stood up. My chair scraped loudly against the floor. The sound echoed like a gunshot. I did not need my cane. I did not feel my hip. I felt only the power of 40 years of building steel and stone. I turned to look at her. Vanessa was not looking at the judge. She was not looking at her lawyer. She was looking at me. And for the first time in 18 years, I saw fear, real primal terror. She was shaking her head back and forth, mouthing the word no over and over again. She knew. She knew the game was over. She knew the mask was gone. I walked toward her. The bailiff started to move, but the judge held up a hand, stopping him. The judge wanted to see this. The whole world wanted to see this. I stopped 2 feet from her table. I looked down at her. I looked at the hands that had poisoned my wife. You, I said. My voice was low, a rumble from the earth. I thought you were just greedy, I said. I thought you were just a thief. I thought you were just a liar. I took a step closer. She shrank back into her chair, pressing herself against the wood as if she could melt into it. You ate at my table, I said, my voice rising, filling the room. You lived in my house. You let me raise your children, and all the while you had my wife's blood on your hands." I pointed a finger at her, a finger calloused by work, by honest labor. "You did not just steal money," I roared. "You killed her. You killed Clara. You killed the only good thing in this rotten family," Vanessa screamed. It was a high, thin sound like an animal caught in a trap. "He is lying," she shrieked, pointing at the blank screen. "Ray is lying. He is trying to frame me. I loved Clara. I loved her like a mother." "You are going to get depressed. We think it is time for a transition." "A transition, that is corporate speak for eviction. We found a place," Vanessa said, pulling a glossy brochure from her purse. "It is called Sunset Hill. It is a lovely facility. Assisted living. They have activities. Bingo, a cafeteria. You will be around people your own age." I looked at the brochure she tossed onto the coffee table. Sunset Hill. I knew the place. It was on the south side of town, next to the water treatment plant. It was a warehouse for the forgotten. It smelled of bleach and boiled cabbage. It was where people went to wait for the reaper. "That place is a kennel," I said. "I am not going there." "You do not have a choice," Vanessa said, her voice dropping the sweet pretense. I looked up at her. "Excuse me, we took a deposit this morning," she said, "on this house. The buyers are cash investors. They want to close in 10 days. But they want the property vacant for inspection by Monday." "Monday." "Liar," I shouted. "Do not say her name. You do not get to say her name." I lunged. Not to hurt her, but to get close enough to see the soul she didn't have. The bailiff grabbed me, then holding me back, but I did not fight. I did not need to touch her. The truth was hitting her harder than my fist ever could. "Officers," the judge said, his voice cutting through the chaos like a blade. 2 police officers who had been waiting in the back of the room stepped forward. They walked through the gate. They walked to the defense table. Vanessa stood up, knocking her chair over. "No," she said, backing away. "No, this is a mistake. I am a mother. I have rights." Vanessa Freeman, one of the officers said, pulling a pair of steel handcuffs from his belt. "You are under arrest for the murder of Clara Freeman." He grabbed her wrist. He spun her around. The click of the cuffs was the sweetest sound I had ever heard. "Murder," she screamed, struggling against him. "It wasn't me. It was Ray. It was Brad. They made me do it." She was still lying, still trying to spend currency she didn't have. They dragged her toward the side door. She passed me. Our eyes met one last time. "Save me, Zeke," she begged, tears streaming down her face, ruining her perfect makeup. "Please. I am family." I looked at her. I looked at the woman who had poisoned my tea, who had poisoned my life. "I have no family," I said. They took her through the door. Her screams faded down the hallway. The courtroom was silent again. I turned back to the judge. He looked shaken. He looked at me with a new respect, a new sorrow. "Mr. Freeman," the judge said, I am so sorry." I nodded. I did not trust myself to speak. "The hearing is adjourned," the judge said, banging the gavel. "All guardianship requests are denied. All assets remain under the sole control of Ezekiel Freeman." Keisha came over to me. She put her arms around me. She was crying. "Daddy," she whispered. "I am so sorry. I didn't know." I hugged her back. I held on to the only real thing I had left. "It is okay, baby," I said. "We know now." We walked out of the courtroom. The press was waiting outside, cameras flashing, microphones thrust in my face. They wanted a quote. They wanted the soundbite of the grieving husband, the vindicated victim. I walked past them. I did not say a word. I walked out into the sunlight. It was blinding. I thought about Clara. I thought about the tea. I thought about the years I had spent sleeping next to a memory while her killer slept down the hall. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. It tasted like justice. But underneath the justice there was the bitter ash of loss. I had won. I had destroyed them. I had burned the house down. But Clara was still dead, and I was still alone. I walked to the car. "Let us go home, Keisha," I said. "To the apartment?" she asked. "No," I said. "To the house. My house. I had some cleaning to do. I had to scrub the floors. I had to open the windows. I had to wash the stain of Vanessa Freeman out of the wood grain before I could ever sleep there again. And then I had to go to the cemetery. I had to tell Clara. I had to tell her that the wolves were gone. The gavel struck the sounding block not with a bang, but with the dull, heavy thud of a coffin lid falling into place. The sound resonated in the hollow of my chest, vibrating against the ribs that had shielded a broken heart for too long. Judge Harrison did not look at Vanessa. He did not look at her lawyer Miller, who was slumped in his chair like a marionette whose strings had been cut. He looked at the paperwork before him, his face a mask of judicial fury contained by centuries of precedent. In the matter of Freeman versus Freeman, the judge began, his voice low and gravelly, filling the silent courtroom. This court finds that the plaintiff, Vanessa Johnson, entered into a marriage contract with the defendant, Isaiah Freeman, while fully cognizant of a pre-existing and undissolved legal union with one Raymond Miller. Vanessa let out a whimper, a small wounded sound that was swallowed by the enormity of the room. She was gripping the table, her knuckles white, her expensive manicure digging into the wood. Therefore the judge continued, relentless as a tide, this court declares the marriage between Isaiah Freeman and Vanessa Johnson void ab initio. It is a nullity. In the eyes of the law, it never existed. There is no marital estate, there is no community property, there is no spousal support. Miller tried to stand, perhaps out of habit, perhaps out of a last shred of professional dignity, to object, but he sank back down. He knew there was nothing to say. The video of Ray Miller confessing to the conspiracy was still burned into the retinas of everyone in the room. However, the judge said, raising his eyes to look directly at Vanessa, this court cannot ignore the egregious nature of the fraud perpetrated here. This was not a simple clerical error. This was a calculated, decades-long enterprise designed to defraud Mr. Freeman of his assets, his emotional labor, and his life. Vanessa was shaking her head, muttering to herself, No, it was love. It was love." The judge ignored her. Based on the evidence presented, specifically the financial records detailing the misappropriation of funds, the fraudulent credit lines, and the systematic looting of Mr. Freeman accounts under the guise of a marital partnership that did not exist, this court is taking extraordinary measures. He turned a page in his file. Since there was no marriage, Vanessa Johnson had no legal right to access Mr. Freeman funds for her personal benefit, nor for the benefit of her biological children with Mr. Miller. Every dollar spent was theft. Every check written was fraud. Vanessa looked up, her eyes wide with a new kind of terror. It was the terror of a person who realizes that zero is not the bottom. You can go lower than zero. You can go into the negative. "I am ordering full restitution," the judge declared. "Mrs. Johnson is hereby ordered to repay the sum of $5,200,000 to Isaiah Freeman. This figure represents the estimated cost of lifestyle housing, unauthorized transfers, and legal fees incurred over the last 18 years. A lien is hereby placed on any and all assets currently held in her name or held in trust for her effective immediately. $5 million. The number hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. It was an impossible sum. It was a life sentence of debt. It meant she would never own anything again. It meant she would never open a bank account, buy a car, or sign a lease without my name shadowing her, demanding what was mine. Furthermore, the judge said, his voice dropping an octave, becoming colder, this court is referring this matter to the district attorney office for immediate criminal prosecution. The charges recommended include bigamy, grand larceny, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. The bailiff moved away from the wall. The doors at the back of the courtroom opened. Vanessa stood up, her chair scraping violently against the floor. "No!" she screamed, the sound tearing her throat. "You cannot do this. I am a mother. I have children." The judge banged the gavel again. "Proceed, officers." 2 uniformed officers entered the courtroom. They were not alone. Behind them, flanked by a detective in a cheap suit, walked Betty, my mother-in-law, or rather, the woman who had played that role. She wasn't wearing her fur coat today. She was wearing a tracksuit, her hair messy, her face gray with the ash of defeat. She had been waiting in the hallway, perhaps hoping to testify, perhaps hoping to salvage something. Instead, she had walked right into the net. Mom Vanessa gasped. Betty looked at her daughter. She didn't offer comfort. She looked at Vanessa with the eyes of a drowning woman looking for a buoy. "They know Vanessa," Betty croaked. "They know about the gambling. They know about the adoption agency in Georgia. They know everything." The officers moved efficiently. They were not gentle. They did not care about the designer clothes or the social standing these women thought they possessed. One officer grabbed Vanessa's wrist, twisting it behind her back. The click of the handcuffs was loud, mechanical, and final. It was the sound of a steel door slamming shut. "Ow, you are hurting me!" Vanessa shrieked. She looked at me. Her eyes were wild, her mascara running in black rivers down her pale cheeks. "Isaiah," she screamed. "Isaiah, please, tell them to stop. I spent 18 years with you. I cooked your meals. I warmed your bed. Does that mean nothing?" I looked at her. I sat comfortably in my chair, my hands resting on the head of my cane. I looked at the woman who had planned to stop my heart with stress. I looked at the woman who had taught another man's sons to hate me. "It means nothing, Vanessa," I said softly, though I knew she couldn't hear me over her own screaming. It was a transaction. And the check bounced. The other officer handcuffed Betty. The older woman didn't scream. She just slumped her legs, giving out, forcing the officer to hold her up. She looked at me, and for a second our eyes met. I saw the recognition of total defeat. She had played the game for 40 years, selling babies, running cons, gambling with other people's money, and she had finally bet against the house and lost. As they dragged Vanessa toward the aisle, she began to thrash. She was losing control, her dignity evaporating like steam. "Dante, Darius," she yelled, looking toward the back of the courtroom. "Help me. Tell them we are a family." I turned in my seat. I hadn't realized they were there. "It was Friday. You sold my house," I asked, the words tasting like ash. "We exercised the power of attorney," Brad explained quickly, sweat beading on his upper lip. "Dad, it is a great offer, above market value. We had to move fast. The market is volatile." I looked at my son. He was vibrating with anxiety. He was not looking at me. He was looking at the floor, at the walls, anywhere but at his father's eyes. "And Sunset Hill," Vanessa added, checking her nails. "They have a bed opening up on Monday morning. We paid the first month. It is efficient. You pack this weekend. We move you Monday. The buyers take the house Tuesday. Done." I set my coffee mug down on the table. It made a loud clack in the silence. I stood up. My hip ached, a reminder of the years of hard labor I had put in to pay for this house, to pay for Brad's college, to pay for the wedding where he married this woman. "Why?" I asked. "What do you mean, why?" Vanessa sighed. "We just explained. It is too big. You are too old." I had thought they were banned, but they must have slipped in during the chaos, sitting in the back row, hidden by the crowd. Dante and Darius. My boys, no Ray's boys. They were sitting side by side, dressed in jeans and hoodies, looking small and young. They watched their mother being manhandled by the police. They watched her face contorted in an ugly mask of greed and fear. They heard the judge call her a thief and a fraud. They looked at her, and then they looked at me. I met their gaze. I didn't look away. I let them see the man they had rejected. I let them see the stability, the strength, the honor they had traded for a lie. Dante looked at his mother, who was now being dragged past him, screaming his name. "Boys, don't let them take me." Dante turned his head. He looked at the wall. He couldn't watch. He couldn't claim her. The shame radiating off him was palpable, a physical heat. Darius put his head in his hands, his shoulders shaking. They turned away from the woman who had created them, and in doing so they acknowledged the monster she was. They did not look at me again. They knew they had lost the right to that gaze. The doors swung shut behind the screaming women. The silence rushed back into the courtroom, heavy and thick. But the demolition was not over. There was one pillar left standing, one weak structural element that needed to be removed. Brad. He was sitting at the defense table alone. He had not been arrested yet, but he had been served. The papers were sitting in front of him. Accomplice to fraud, insurance fraud, financial concealment. The company he worked for had already fired him that morning. His assets were frozen. His car was being towed from the courthouse parking lot as we spoke. He stood up slowly. He looked like a man who had aged 20 years in 20 minutes. He walked toward the bar that separated the gallery from the court. He walked toward me. He stopped a few feet away. He looked at my shoes. He couldn't look me in the face. "Dad," he whispered, his voice cracking like dry wood. I waited. I did not help him. "Dad, please," he said, looking up, tears filling his eyes. "You have to help me. I didn't know about the murder. I didn't know about Ray. She lied to me, Dad. She tricked me. I was a victim too." He reached out a hand that had never known a day of hard labor because I had protected it. "Fix this, Dad," he begged. "You always fix it. I have nowhere to go. They took the house. They took the accounts. I am going to prison, Dad. You can stop this. You have the money. You can pay the restitution. Please, I am your son. I looked at him. I looked at the man of 40 who was still a boy of 10. I saw the weakness I had nurtured. I saw the entitlement I had watered. I stood up. My hip was stiff, but I felt lighter than I had in 20 years. The parasite was gone. The weight was lifted. I looked my son in the eye. I saved you for 40 years, Brad, I said, my voice filling the space between us. I paid your way. I covered your mistakes. I bought your lies. I built a shelter so strong you never had to feel the rain. I leaned in closer. And you tried to sell the roof over my head. Dad, no! He sobbed, reaching for my sleeve. I pulled my arm away. I am done saving you, I said. The bank of Zeke is closed. But what will I do? He wailed. How will I survive? I adjusted my coat. I gripped my cane. You will swim, I said. Or you will drown. But you will do it alone. I turned my back on him. I heard him collapse into the chair, sobbing like a child who has dropped his ice cream. It was a pathetic sound, a sound that used to break my heart. Now it just sounded like noise. I walked down the aisle. I walked past the empty benches. I walked past the spot where Dante and Darius were still sitting frozen in their misery. I stopped for a brief second. I could hear Darius sniffing. I could smell the cheap cologne Dante wore, the same smell that had been in my house the night he shoved me. I could have stopped. I could have put a hand on a shoulder. I could have offered a word of comfort, a bridge back to the life they had lost. The old Isaiah the father would have done that. But the engineer knew better. You do not build on a foundation that is already crumbled. You do not patch a wall that is riddled with rot. You tear it down. You clear the site. You walk away. I tightened my grip on my cane. I looked straight ahead at the double doors leading to the street, to the sunlight, to the rest of my life. I started walking. The tap of my cane on the floor was steady, rhythmic, the sound of a man moving forward. I did not look left. I did not look right. And most importantly, I did not look back. I pushed open the doors and stepped out into the city I had built. The air was cold and clean. I was 75 years old. I was alone, and I was free. The morning sun sat low over the water, painting the surface of Lake Lanier in ripples of burnt orange and gold. It was quiet here. The only sounds were the rhythmic lap of the water against the private dock and the occasional cry of a heron taking flight from the reeds. I sat in a folding chair at the end of the pier, a fishing rod in my hand, the line disappearing into the dark, cool depths. I wasn't really fishing. I didn't care if I caught anything. I was just breathing. For the first time in 18 years, I was breathing air that wasn't recycled through a ventilation system of lies. It had been a month since the gavel fell. A month since Vanessa was led away in handcuffs, screaming my name like a curse. A month since the house on Oak Street was put on the market, emptied of its ghosts. I was staying in the second house Clara had left me. She called it her escape hatch. I called it my sanctuary. It wasn't the shack in the bottoms. It was a 4-bedroom cedar villa with a wraparound porch and a view that cost $1 million. Clara had bought it through a shell company 10 years ago using the profits from her investments. She never told me because she knew I would want to share it with the family. She knew I would bring the wolves to the door. She was smarter than me. She always was. I heard the gravel crunch on the long driveway long before I saw them. I didn't turn around. I knew who it was. I had been expecting this visit. It was the final loose thread, the last piece of debris that needed to be cleared before the site could be declared safe. Footsteps on the wooden planks of the dock, hesitant, heavy. The footsteps of men who were used to walking with swagger but were now learning to walk with shame. I kept my eyes on the bobber floating on the water. Grandpa. The voice was Dante. It was smaller than I remembered, thinner. I slowly reeled in the line. I set the rod down against the railing. I turned my chair around. They stood there, Dante and Darius, my grandsons, no Ray's sons. They looked like wrecks. Their designer clothes were gone, replaced by cheap denim and flannel that didn't fit quite right. They had lost weight. Their faces were gaunt. The baby fat of privilege melted away by 30 days of reality. They looked tired. They looked hungry. They looked like refugees from a life they had burned down with their own hands. But mostly they looked like Ray. I saw it now, clear as day. The set of the eyes, the weak curve of the mouth, the way they stood shifting their weight, looking for an angle. It was biology screaming its truth. But layered over that biology were 18 years of my memories. I saw the scar on Darius's chin from when he fell off his bike. I saw the way Dante held his hands, a habit he picked up from watching me work. It was a cruel mosaic, a picture made of two irreconcilable halves. We didn't think you would see us, Darius said, his voice cracking. Keisha said we shouldn't come, but we had to. I looked at them. I didn't offer them a seat. I didn't offer them a drink. I just looked. What do you want? I asked. My voice was not angry. It was just tired. We want to come home, Dante said. He dropped to his knees on the hard wood of the dock. It was a theatrical gesture, something he must have seen in a movie or learned from his mother. Darius followed suit, kneeling beside his brother. We are sorry, Grandpa, Dante sobbed. We were stupid. We were brainwashed. Mom, she told us lies. She made us hate you. But we know now. We know she was the monster. Please, Grandpa, Darius pleaded, tears streaming down his face. Take us back. We don't have anywhere to go. We are sleeping in a shelter. We can't go to school. We have nothing. I looked at these two young men kneeling before me. Part of me, the part that had warmed bottles at 3 a.m, wanted to reach out, wanted to pull them up, hug them, tell them it was going to be okay, that I could fix it. I had the money. I could write a check and make the pain go away. That is what I had done for 18 years. I had paved their road with gold so they would never stub their toes. But then I remembered the courtroom. I remembered the signature on the document disavowing me. I remembered the look of disgust on Dante's face when he called security on me. I remembered them choosing Ray because he was cool. They weren't here because they loved me. They were here because they were cold. They were here because the shelter was hard and the food was bad. They were here because the ATM was broken. You call me Grandpa, I said softly. But a month ago you signed a paper saying I was a stranger. You stood in a parking lot and told me you wanted me dead. We didn't mean it, Dante cried. We were confused. No, I said. My voice was low, dangerous. I want to know why you need the money, because you do not sell a paid-off house in 3 days unless you are bleeding cash. Brad flinched. Dad, it is not about needing money. It is about investment. I have a tech startup opportunity, a once-in-a-lifetime thing. If I get in on the ground floor, I can double the equity in 6 months. We are doing this for the family legacy. Legacy. Just then, Brad's phone buzzed on the coffee table where he had laid it down. It vibrated angrily against the wood. The screen lit up. He was too slow to grab it. I was closer. I did not pick it up, but I looked down. My eyesight might be fading, but I could still read bold block letters. The notification was a text message. It was not from a business partner. It was not from a bank. The sender ID was The Shark. The message read, $50K due Monday. No extensions, or we break knees. I looked at the screen until it went dark. Then I looked at Brad. You weren't confused, Dante, I said. You were arrogant. You thought you had a better offer. You bet on the wrong horse, and now that you have lost, you want the safety net back. I reached into the pocket of my fishing vest. I pulled out 2 white envelopes. They were thick but not heavy. I stood up. My hip twinged, a permanent souvenir of their betrayal. I walked over to them. They looked up at me, hope flaring in their eyes. They thought this was it. The redemption. The check. I handed one envelope to Dante. I handed the other to Darius. Take them, I said. They tore them open with trembling hands. They pulled out the contents. It wasn't a check for tuition. It wasn't a key to the house. It was a Greyhound bus ticket. One way. To a town called Hardscrabble, Texas, and $500 in small bills. They stared at the money. They stared at the tickets. What is this? Darius whispered. It is a start, I said. It is more than I had when I was 18. It is more than your biological father ever gave you. Grandpa. Dante started. Stop, I said. The word was sharp like a whip crack. Do not call me that. I am not your grandfather. Your grandfather is a man named Ray Miller, who is currently sitting in a cell in the county jail awaiting trial for fraud. If you want a grandfather, go visit him. I pointed to the envelopes in their hands. That ticket takes you to a working ranch in Texas. I know the foreman. He owes me a favor. He needs hands to clear brush and dig fence posts. It pays minimum wage. It provides a bunk and 2 meals a day. You are sending us to a farm? Darius asked, his voice full of disbelief. Like Like laborers. No, I said. I am sending you to work. I looked out at the lake. The sun was higher now, burning off the mist. For 18 years I crippled you, I said. I gave you everything you wanted and nothing you needed. I taught you that money was a right, not a reward. I raised you to be soft. And because you were soft, you were easy for your mother to mold. I looked back at them. I am giving you the only gift I have left to give. I am giving you the chance to struggle. I am giving you the chance to find out who you are when the name Freeman isn't there to open doors for you. But we are your family, Dante yelled, standing up, the anger flashing behind the tears. You can't just throw us away. I didn't throw you away, I said calmly. You walked away. You closed the door. I am just locking it. I turned my back on them. I walked back to my chair. I picked up my fishing rod. Go to Texas, I said over my shoulder. Or don't. Go find Ray. Go find another hustle. It is your choice. That is the beauty of being an adult. You get to choose, Grandpa Darius screamed. I cast the line back into the water. The plop of the lure hitting the surface was the only sound I acknowledged. Don't come back, I said to the water. Don't come back until you have paid your debts. Don't come back until you have built something with your own hands. Don't come back until you can look me in the eye and see a man, not a bank. I heard them standing there for a long time. I heard their breathing. I heard the rustle of the paper envelopes. I knew they were waiting for me to turn around. They were waiting for the Hollywood ending where the old man's heart softens and he gathers them into his arms. But this wasn't a movie. This was a demolition site. And you don't let people play in the rubble. Eventually I heard the slow, heavy footsteps retreating down the dock. I heard the crunch of gravel as they walked back up the driveway. I heard the silence return to the lake. I sat there alone. My chest felt tight, a physical ache that radiated out to my fingertips. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. Harder than burying my wife. Harder than building the skyscrapers. Harder than facing Ray in that bar. It was necessary cruelty. It was the only way to save them from themselves. If I took them back now, they would never learn. They would just learn that betrayal carries no cost. They would become Ray. They would become Vanessa. I had to break them to fix them. Or maybe they were just broken, and I was just finally accepting that I couldn't put the pieces back together. I watched the bobber dance on the water. A fish was nibbling at the bait. I didn't reel it in, I just watched it. I was alone. I had no wife. I had no son. I had no grandsons. I had a daughter named Keisha who loved me and a fortune I had protected from the wolves. It was enough. It had to be enough. I took a deep breath of the clean, cold air. I was Ezekiel Freeman, and I was finally truly free. The for sale sign in the front yard of the house on Oak Street did not stay up for long. In this market, a custom-built colonial with a structural integrity rating of 100% is a rare find. I sold it to a young couple, a doctor and a teacher, who looked at the high ceilings and the crown molding and saw a future. I looked at the same walls and saw only the past, a museum of 18 years of deception. I walked through the empty rooms one last time before handing over the keys. The movers had taken everything. The furniture was gone. The art was gone. The echoes of Dante and Darius running down the hallway were gone, silenced by the fresh coat of paint I had ordered. I stood in the dining room looking at the spot on the floor where I had fallen, where my hip had slammed against the wood. The scratch was still there, faint, but visible, a scar on the house, just like the ache in my joint was a scar on my body. I did not feel sentimental. I felt like a demolition expert walking away from a successful implosion. The dust had settled. The site was cleared. It was time to build something else. I drove away from Oak Street without looking in the rearview mirror. I drove to the courthouse one last time, not for a hearing, but to witness the conclusion of the paperwork. Keisha met me in the lobby. She looked grim, but satisfied. "It is done, Daddy," she said, handing me a thick file. "The judgment is finalized, the liens are perfected, and the sentencing hearings are concluded." I opened the file. I read the numbers. I read the years. Vanessa Johnson, formerly Freeman, sentenced to life in a federal penitentiary without the possibility of parole. The charges were a laundry list of greed and violence, murder by poisoning, conspiracy, grand larceny, and identity theft. The judge had shown no mercy. He saw her not as a mother who made a mistake, but as a predator who had hunted a senior citizen for sport and ended the life of a good woman. Keisha told me about her final days in the holding cell before the transfer. Vanessa had not adjusted well. She had walked into the detention center with her head high, demanding special treatment, demanding to speak to the manager as if she were at a hotel. She had insulted the other inmates, calling them animals. The correction officers found her 2 days later in the showers. She had been beaten. Badly. Her nose was broken, her eyes swollen shut, the arrogance literally kicked out of her face. The women in there did not care about her social standing or her plans for Paris. They saw a woman who thought she was better than them, and they taught her the hierarchy of the cage. Life in prison. She would rot in a cell surrounded by concrete and steel materials I used to build dreams, but that now formed her coffin. She would have decades to think about the potassium she put in Clara tea. She would have a lifetime to miss the luxury she had killed to obtain. And Brad, my son, 5 years. The judge had given him 5 years for being an accomplice to fraud, for concealment of financial crimes, and for the insurance scams. It was a light sentence compared to Vanessa, but for a man like Brad, it was an eternity. I read the report. He had lost everything. The house he lived in was foreclosed. His car was repossessed. His retirement accounts were seized to pay the restitution. He was 40 years old and he had a net worth of 0. Keisha told me about his sentencing. He had looked for me in the gallery. He had searched the faces of the strangers, hoping to see his father, hoping for a last-minute rescue, a check written to make the bad men go away. I was not there. He wept when the sentence was read. He collapsed not with dignity, but with the boneless surrender of a man who has never had to stand on his own 2 feet. When he gets out, he will have nothing. No home, no wife, no money, no father. He will be a middle-aged man with a felony record and a history of cowardice. He will be homeless. He will know what it is like to sleep in the cold, to wonder where his next meal is coming from. He will finally live the reality I protected him from his entire life. I closed the file. I handed it back to Keisha. Burn it, I said. Or file it. I do not care. I am done with them. I drove to the bank, the real bank, the one where Clara had hidden the trust. I sat in the manager office and signed the papers. I took the $600,000 she had saved, the money she had scraped together from grocery budgets and tax refunds. I took the restitution money that the court had clawed back from Vanessa hidden accounts. It was a lot of money. Enough to buy a yacht. Enough to travel the world. But I did not want those things. That money was sacred. It was Clara legacy. I established the Clara Freeman Scholarship Fund. It was not for my family, it was for kids like I used to be. Black kids from the South Side. He snatched the phone up, shoving it deep into his pocket, his face draining of blood until he looked like a ghost. He knew I had seen it. He knew that I knew. Investment, I said softly. Brad swallowed hard. Yeah. Dad. Just business. I looked at Vanessa. She did not know about the text. She was too busy calculating the profit from the house sale in her head. She thought this was about greed. She did not know it was about survival. My son was a gambler. He was in deep with loan sharks. That was why they were rushing. That was why they needed the cash by Tuesday. They were selling my life to pay for his sins. I felt a wave of nausea followed by a cold, hard clarity. If I fought them now, if I told them I knew about the gambling, Brad would break. He would beg. He would guilt me into helping him. He would drag me down into his hole. And Vanessa, she would just find another way to skin me. I remembered Clara's letter. Let them show you who they are. They had shown me. Kids with calloused hands and bright minds who wanted to be engineers, architects, and builders. Kids who knew the value of hard work but didn't have the means to get the education they deserved. I put Keisha in charge of the board. We selected the first 10 students immediately. I paid their full tuition. I paid for their books. I paid for their housing. I gave them the start that I had given Brad, but these kids didn't take it for granted. They looked at me with hunger and gratitude, not entitlement. I met with them. I shook their hands. I saw the fire in their eyes. I saw the future. It wasn't the bloodline legacy I had planned. It wasn't the grandfather's watch passed down to a grandson. But it was real. It was honest. And it was built to last. I left the bank and drove to the outskirts of the city. The sun was beginning to set, painting the sky in bruised purples and deep oranges. I drove through the iron gates of the cemetery. I parked the truck under the old oak tree. I walked up the hill. My hip hurt, but I welcomed the pain. It was proof that I was still alive, that I was still moving forward. I reached the plot. It was quiet here. The city noise was just a distant hum. I stood before the headstone. It was granite polished to a mirror shine. Clara Freeman, beloved wife, mother, builder of men. I knelt down. The grass was cool and damp against my jeans. There were weeds growing around the base of the stone, dandelions, crabgrass, small invasive things trying to choke out the beauty. I reached out with my hands, my old scarred hands. I pulled the weeds. I dug my fingers into the earth and ripped them out by the roots. I cleared the soil. I wiped the dirt from the letters of her name. I sat there for a long time. I watched the sun dip below the horizon. I listened to the wind rustling the leaves of the oak tree. I thought about the empty house on Oak Street. I thought about the cell where Vanessa sat. I thought about the cold bunk where Brad lay. I thought about the new house by the lake the sanctuary Clara had bought for me. I leaned forward until my forehead touched the cold stone. "I did it, Clara," I whispered. My voice cracked, but I did not cry. I had no tears left. I doused the fire, I said. I tore down the condemned structure. I cleared the site. I ran my hand over her name. It was hard, Clara. It was the hardest job I ever took. I had to cut away my own heart to save my life. I paused, listening to the silence. But it is done. The parasites are gone. The thieves are locked away. I stood up. I brushed the dirt from my knees. I looked at the clean grave, the manicured grass, the stone that would stand for 100 years. I cleaned the weeds, Clara, I said softly. Our garden is clean now. I turned and walked back to the truck. I did not look back. I did not need to. Clara was with me. She was in the truck engine. She was in the deed to the lake house. She was in the eyes of the students I had just helped. I started the engine. I turned on the headlights. I drove out of the cemetery and onto the highway. The road stretched out before me, dark and open. I was 75 years old. I was alone. But for the first time in a long time, I was heading home. We spend our lives terrified of being alone, so we cling to toxic people simply because we share a last name. But I learned that the empty chair at the table is far more peaceful than the chair occupied by a traitor. You cannot buy love and you cannot inherit character. The greatest tragedy wasn't losing my son to greed. It was losing myself to the delusion that I could save him. Don't set yourself on fire just to keep others warm. Walk away. Sometimes the only applause that matters is the quiet beat of your own healed heart. If you have ever had to cut off a toxic family member to save your own sanity, type freedom in the comments below. Don't forget to like and share this story to inspire someone who needs the courage to walk away today. They were desperate, they were dangerous, and they were not my family anymore. They were parasites. I took a deep breath. I looked around the living room one last time. I said goodbye to the fireplace I had built. I said goodbye to the memories. Okay, I said. Vanessa blinked. She had been winding up for a fight, ready to scream and threaten. My surrender caught her off balance. Okay, she repeated. You are right, I said, forcing my shoulders to slump, making myself look smaller, older, defeated. The house is too much work. My hip hurts. Maybe it is time to rest. Brad let out a breath that sounded like a tire deflating. Oh, thank God. Dad, you are making the right choice. Seriously, this is going to be great for everyone. Great for you, I thought. You get to keep your kneecaps, so you will pack. Vanessa asked, her eyes narrowing suspiciously. You will be ready Monday. I will be ready, I said. I do not have much, just my clothes, my tools. Clara's Bible. Good, Vanessa said. She said they were the trumpets of the angels, but to my daughter-in-law, Vanessa, they were just a line item on a receipt she did not want to pay. I could hear her whispering behind me. Her voice was a hiss that cut through the somber organ music. Brad. I do not understand why we had to get the deluxe floral package. She is dead. She does not know the difference between a lily and a dandelion. I stiffened. My hands clenched on the head of my cane. I wanted to turn around and tell her that 40 years of marriage earned a woman some flowers, but I stayed silent. I was 75 years old. I had built bridges in this city that thousands of cars drove over every day. I knew that you do not fight the wind, you just brace the structure, Brad whispered back, but his voice was weak. Vanessa, please, not now, Dad can hear you. Let him hear, Vanessa snapped. He needs to know the reality of the situation. This funeral is costing us $5,000. We will send a truck on Monday morning, 8 a.m. sharp. Be ready. And Zeke, don't try anything funny. The paperwork is signed. This house isn't yours anymore. I know, I said. I know exactly whose house this is. They turned to leave. They had won. They had stripped the old man of his fortress. They walked to the door, their steps lighter, the weight of their debts momentarily lifted by the promise of my equity. At the door, Brad paused. He looked back at me. For a second, I saw a flicker of shame in his eyes. Just a flicker. "It is a nice place, Dad," he said weakly. "Sunset Hill. You will like it." I looked at him. I looked at the son who was willing to put me in a place that smelled of death so he could pay off a bookie. "Do not worry about me, son," I said. Vanessa opened the door, letting the cold wind in. "Where will you go until Monday? Do not think you are coming to stay with us. We do not have the room." I smiled. It was a dry, thin smile. "I did not ask to stay with you, Vanessa," I said. "I have a place." She scoffed. A cruel, ugly sound. A place. What place? Under a bridge. A homeless shelter. "Do not be dramatic. Zeke, just have your bags packed for the nursing home." She did not wait for an answer. She walked out. Brad followed her, closing the door on my face. I stood in the silence of the hallway. A place. Yes, I had a place. I reached into my pocket and fingered the cold, jagged edge of the key Clara had left me. The key to 4200 Maple Drive. They thought they were evicting a helpless old man. They thought they were sending me to the scrapyard. They did not know that while they were playing checkers, Clara had been playing chess from the grave. I walked to the kitchen. I poured the cold coffee down the sink. I washed the mug and dried it carefully. Then I went to the basement to get my suitcases. I had packing to do. But I wasn't packing for Sunset Hill. I was packing for my rebirth. And as for Brad and his $50,000 debt, Monday was coming for him too. And I had a feeling the shark would not be as forgiving as his father. Monday morning arrived with the subtle grace of a sledgehammer hitting a pane of glass. The sky was the color of a bruised plum, heavy with rain that refused to fall, just hanging there like a threat. I stood on the porch of the house on Oak Street, my 2 battered leather suitcases sitting at my feet. They were the same suitcases Clara and I had taken on our honeymoon to Charleston 45 years ago. Back then, they held dreams and fresh linen shirts. Now they held my clothes, my toiletries, and the few tools I refused to leave behind. I watched the moving truck pull away. It was not carrying my things. It was carrying the staging furniture Vanessa had rented to make my home look like a Pottery Barn catalog for the investors. My real furniture, the pieces Clara and I had collected over a lifetime, had been sold for pennies on the dollar at an estate sale I was not allowed to attend. Vanessa said it was to save me the emotional trauma. I knew it was because she wanted the cash in hand before the ink was dry on the deed. I heard the roar of an engine. Brad's BMW pulled up to the curb, followed closely by Vanessa's white Mercedes. They parked blocking the driveway, boxing me in. They wanted to make sure the old dog actually left the porch. Brad got out. He was wearing sunglasses, even though it was overcast, hiding his eyes, hiding his shame. "Ready, Dad?" he called out, leaning against his car door. I picked up my suitcases. They were heavy, but not as heavy as the silence between a father and a son who has sold him out. "I am ready," I said. I walked to my truck. My 1990 Ford F-150. It had rust on the wheel wells and a dent in the tailgate from when I backed into a lumber pile in '98. It was ugly reliable and paid for, unlike everything my son owned. "Where are you going?" Vanessa asked, rolling down her window. She did not get out. The air was too damp for her hair. "I told you," I said, putting my bags in the passenger seat. "I have a place." She laughed. A short, sharp bark. "We are going to follow you, Zeke, just to make sure you do not get lost and end up back on our doorstep. We need the keys to this place by noon." "Suit yourself," I said. I climbed into the truck. The engine turned over with a growl. I pulled out of the driveway, not looking back at the house. If I looked back, I might turn into a pillar of salt, or worse, I might get out of the truck and break my son's nose. I drove. I did not drive toward the nice part of town. I did not drive toward the suburbs. I pointed the truck south, toward the bottoms. I checked my rear view mirror. The white Mercedes and the black BMW were right there trailing me like sharks smelling blood in the water. I smiled. Good. Let them see. I led them past the old steel mill, now just a skeleton of rusted beams against the gray sky. I led them past the pawn shops and the liquor stores with bars on the windows. I led them down streets where the potholes were deep enough to swallow a hubcap. I pulled up to 4200 Maple Drive. It was a masterpiece of misery. The house was a shotgun shack that leaned precariously to the left as if it were tired of standing up. The paint, once white, was now the color of dirty dishwater and peeling in long, scabrous strips. The front porch sagged like a broken jaw. The yard was a jungle of knee-high weeds and broken glass. I parked the truck. I got out. Behind me, I heard car doors slam. Brad and Vanessa stood on the cracked sidewalk looking at the house with a mixture of horror and delight. "This is it," Vanessa asked, her voice dripping with disgust. "This is your place." I walked up the creaking steps. I took the key Clara had left me out of my pocket. It fit the lock. "It is paid for," I said. I opened the door. The smell hit me instantly. Mildew, old dust, and the faint, sweet scent of rot. It was perfect. I walked inside. They followed me. Of course they did. They had to see the squalor. They had to gloat. The interior was sparse, a stained mattress on the floor, a wobbly table, a single chair. I had rented this place 2 days ago from a slumlord named Tony who owed me a favor from a construction job back in the 80s. I paid him $200 cash to use it for a week. Vanessa walked around the room, stepping carefully as if the floor might contaminate her Italian leather soles. She looked at the water stains on the ceiling. She looked at the cockroach skittering into a crack in the baseboard. "Well," she said, a cruel smile spreading across her face, "it is certainly humble, but I suppose it is fitting. This is about your speed, is it not, Zeke? A broken-down house for a broken-down man." Brad looked around, rubbing the back of his neck. "Dad, this place is... Are you sure about this?" "It doesn't look safe. There is black mold." "It is a roof, Brad," I said, setting my suitcases on the table. "It is better than the nursing home." Vanessa laughed. "Barely. But hey, at least you are not burdening us anymore. You are finally living within your means." She walked over to the table where I had placed my suitcases. Her eyes narrowed. She was looking for something. She was looking for the money. She knew Clara was frugal. She knew we lived simple lives. She was convinced that somewhere hidden in a sock drawer or a coffee can, there was a stash of cash she hadn't found yet. "Are you going to unpack?" she asked, reaching for the latch of my suitcase. I put my hand over hers. My grip was like a vice. "Do not touch my things," I said. She yanked her hand back. "I am just trying to help." She lied. "You probably packed a bunch of junk you do not need." She moved to a cardboard box I had placed in the corner earlier that morning. It was filled with old papers, receipts, and photo albums. "What is in here?" she asked, kicking the box. "Memories," I said. She crouched down. She started rifling through the papers. She was frantic now. She was tearing through electric bills from 1995, looking for a bank book, a savings bond, anything green. "Vanessa, stop it," Brad said weakly. "Let's just go." "No," she hissed. "Your mother was a hoarder. She hid things. I know she did. There has to be something left. We sold the furniture and we barely covered the interest on the loan. There has to be more." She pulled out a photo album. It was an old one with a red velvet cover. It was the album from our 10th anniversary trip to Savannah. She shook it, hoping money would fall out. Nothing fell out but a few loose photographs. She opened it, flipping through the pages so hard I heard the paper tear. "Where is it?" she screamed, her frustration boiling over. "Where is the money, Zeke? I know you have it. You did not buy this dump with air. I rented it," I said quietly. "Liar," she screamed. She grabbed a photo. It was a picture of Clara and me standing on the riverwalk, laughing, holding cotton candy. We looked young. We looked happy. We looked like people who didn't know their son would marry a shark. Vanessa looked at the photo. She looked at me. And then with a look of pure malice, she ripped it in half. She tore right through Clara's face. She threw the pieces on the floor. "Oops," she said. My hand slipped. "Just like your grip on reality." I stared at the torn photo. I felt a rage so hot it almost blinded me. I wanted to grab her by her expensive blazer and throw her through the rotting window. I wanted to tell her that this house was a prop. That is $5,000 that could have gone into the marketing budget for my boutique. I closed my eyes. My wife was not even in the ground yet, and her ashes were being weighed against a marketing budget. I felt a hand on my shoulder. It was Brad, my only son, the boy I had taught to throw a baseball, the boy I had put through college so he would not have to pour concrete like his father. He was 40 years old now, but in that moment he looked like a child who had broken a window and was trying to hide the baseball. "Dad," Brad said, sitting down next to me. I moved my cane to give him room. He smelled of nervous sweat and expensive cologne. "Dad, listen, we need to handle some paperwork before the service starts." I looked at him. "Paperwork. Now, it is just standard stuff, Dad," he said, pulling a thick envelope from his jacket pocket. His hands were shaking. "It is for the life insurance. You know how these companies are. If we do not file immediately, they drag their feet for months." I wanted to tell her that the real asset, the real second house Clara had left me, was a 3-story commercial brick building in the historic downtown district, currently leased to a law firm and a tech startup, generating $8,000 a month in passive income. I wanted to tell her she was standing in filth while I held the keys to a kingdom. But I didn't. Because if I told her now, she would sue. She would fight. She would find a way to drag it out. I needed her to think I was finished. I needed her to think I was destitute. I bent down and picked up the pieces of the photo. I brushed the dust off Clara's smiling face. "Get out," I whispered. "What?" Vanessa asked. "Get out of my house," I roared, my voice shaking the dust from the rafters. Vanessa flinched. She stepped back, nearly tripping over her own heels. "Fine," she spat. "Rot here, die here, see if we care. Come on, Brad." Brad looked at me. He looked at the torn photo in my hand. "Dad, go," I said. "Go with your wife. Go pay your shark." They left. I heard the Mercedes peel out, throwing gravel against the side of the shack. I stood there in the silence for a long time. I carefully placed the torn photo in my pocket. Then I checked my watch. It was 1 o'clock. I did not unpack. I did not stay in the shack. I picked up my tool bag. It was the heavy canvas bag I had carried for 30 years. Inside, nestled among the wrenches and the screwdrivers, were 4 small boxes, high-definition wireless pinhole cameras, battery-operated, motion-activated, with remote cloud storage. I walked out of the shack. I locked the door, though there was nothing inside worth stealing. I got back in my truck. I drove back to the north side of town. I drove to Brad and Vanessa's house. I knew their schedule. Vanessa had a nail appointment at 2. Brad would be at the office, which meant he would be at the track or a bar, trying to double the money from the house sale before he had to pay the loan shark. I pulled up a block away. Their driveway was empty. I walked to the back door. I had a key. I had built the deck they used for their summer parties. I had installed the deadlock myself 3 years ago. I kept a spare because Brad was always locking himself out. I let myself in. The house smelled of vanilla candles and deception. It was clean, sterile, like a showroom. I went to work. I moved with the efficiency of a man who knows exactly how a building is put together. I installed the first camera in the living room, tucked inside the smoke detector. It had a wide-angle view of the sofa and the dining table. I installed the second camera in the kitchen, hidden behind the decorative molding on top of the cabinets. It looked down at the island where they sorted their mail and argued about bills. I installed the third camera in Brad's home office, wedged into the spine of a book on the shelf. And the fourth camera. I went to the master bedroom. I did not want to see their intimacy. I did not want to see their marriage bed. But I knew Vanessa. I knew she was vain. I knew she spent hours at her vanity table talking on the phone to her friends, to her mother, revealing her secrets when she thought no one was listening. I installed the fourth camera behind the mirror glass of her vanity. It was a trick I had learned installing security systems for high-end clients in the 90s. It took me 45 minutes. When I was done, there was no dust, no wires, no trace that I had been there. I walked out the back door. I locked it. I got back in my truck and drove away. I was not going back to the shack on Maple Drive. I was going to the Holiday Inn Express on the highway. I had booked a room for a week under the name Thomas Freeman. I set up my laptop on the hotel desk. I connected to the secure server. 4 screens popped up: living room, kitchen, office, bedroom. The trap was set. They thought I was crying in a slum. They thought I was broken. But I was watching. And I was recording. I opened a beer from the minibar. I toasted the screen. "Showtime," I whispered. Just then, on the kitchen camera, I saw the back door open. Vanessa walked in. She was on the phone. She looked excited. "Mom," she said into the phone, tossing her keys on the counter. "You will not believe it. We dropped the old baggage off at a dump in the Bottoms. He is gone. The money is ours." Yes, all of it. I took a sip of beer. Talk, Vanessa, I thought. Keep talking. Every word is a nail in your coffin. And then she said something that made me freeze. She walked over to the fridge and pulled out a bottle of wine. "Yeah," she laughed. "Brad is paying the guy today. But Mom, listen, we need to move fast on the next part, the insurance policy on the old man. We need to make sure the payments are current, because if he dies in that rat hole, it is double indemnity for accidental death." I set the beer down. They weren't just waiting for me to die. They were betting on it. I leaned closer to the screen. The game had just changed. It wasn't just about teaching them a lesson anymore. It was about survival. And I was the one holding the remote. The flashing blue lights of the police cruiser cut through the darkness of Keisha's living room, painting the walls in spasms of neon violence. It was 11 o'clock at night. I sat in the armchair, my hip throbbing a dull, constant rhythm, watching the rain streak the window pane. I did not need to look outside to know who was there. I knew the procedure. I knew the law. When a judge signs a piece of paper declaring a man dangerous, the state sends its enforcers to strip him of his claws. Keisha opened the door. 2 officers stood on the porch, water dripping from the brims of their hats. One was young white, with a jaw square enough to break bricks. The other was older black, with tired eyes that met mine across the room. He knew. I could see it in his stance. He knew he was about to humiliate an elder, a man who had built half the bridges this city drove over, but he had his orders. "Mr. Freeman," the older officer said, stepping into the foyer, "I am Sergeant Vance. We are here to serve a temporary restraining order." I stood up. It took effort. My joints were stiff, locking up from the stress and the fall earlier that night. I walked to the door, my posture straight, my chin held high. I would not give them the satisfaction of seeing me broken. "I understand, Sergeant," I said. My voice was calm, a deep rumble that seemed to surprise the younger officer. "You are required to surrender any firearms in your possession," Vance said, his hand resting instinctively near his belt. "The order mandates the immediate removal of all weapons." I felt a cold stone settle in my stomach. I had owned a Colt 1911 for 40 years. It was a collector's piece kept in a lockbox, cleaned every Sunday, never fired in anger. It was not just a gun. It was a symbol. It was the guarantee that I could protect my home. Now, because of a lie told by a woman who had never worked a day in her life, I was being disarmed like a common criminal. "It is in the trunk of my car," I said. "In a locked case." Keisha moved to intervene. "Officers, Mr. Freeman is a licensed holder. He has never—" "It is okay, Keisha," I interrupted. "Do not fight the current. Let it flow." I walked out into the rain with them. I opened the trunk of the Cadillac. The black case sat there glistening under the streetlights. I unlocked it. The steel of the gun was cold and heavy. I handed it to Vance. He took it with both hands, checking the chamber, treating it with a respect that felt like a mockery. "Receipt, please," I said. He scribbled on a notepad and handed me the slip of paper. It felt light, flimsy. I had traded my protection for a scrap of carbon paper. "Stay away from the residence." Mr. Freeman, Vance said, his voice softening slightly. 500 feet. No contact. If you violate this, we will arrest you. Do you understand?" "I understand," I said. They got back in their cruiser and drove away, the lights fading into the wet night. I stood there for a moment, the rain soaking my shirt, feeling a nakedness I had not felt since I was a boy. I was 75 years old. I was homeless. I was weaponless. I was a man stripped down to his bones. I went back inside. Keisha was sitting at the kitchen table, staring at her tablet with a look of absolute horror. She was standing behind her, his face grim. "What is it?" I asked, wiping the water from my face. "You should not see this, Daddy," Keisha said, trying to turn the screen away. "Show me," I commanded. She hesitated, then turned the tablet toward me. It was a live stream. Facebook, Vanessa. She was sitting on the beige sofa in our living room. My living room. The lighting was perfect, soft, and sympathetic. She was wearing a t-shirt I had never seen, old and frayed, making her look vulnerable. Her hair was messy. And there were tears. great glistening tears rolling down her cheeks. He just snapped. She sobbed into the camera. The comments were scrolling up the side of the screen so fast they were a blur. "Stay strong, Queen. What a monster. Men are trash. Call the cops." I listened to her lie. I watched her performance. "He has been controlling me for years," she whispered, her voice trembling. "But tonight he broke down the door. He threatened to kill us all. I am so scared. I do not know what he will do next. He is unstable. He is losing his mind. Please, if anyone sees him, call the police." I watched the number of viewers tick up. 500, 1,000. "We just need to make sure you are the primary beneficiary and that the funds can be released to cover these expenses." He clicked a pen and held it out to me. He did not look me in the eye. He looked at the urn. I took the papers. The print was small. My eyes were old, but my mind was sharp. I was an engineer. I read blueprints for a living. I knew that the devil was always in the details. I put on my reading glasses. "Just sign at the bottom, Dad," Vanessa whispered, leaning over the pew. "We do not have all day. The pastor is about to come out." I looked at the top of the document. It did not say life insurance claim. It said, "Durable power of attorney." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the drafty church. Power of attorney. This document would give Brad complete control over my finances, my medical decisions, and my assets. It would give him the power to sell my house. It would give him the power to put me in a home. I looked at Brad. 2000. The court of public opinion was in session, and the verdict was guilty. My reputation, built brick by brick over 50 years, was being dismantled in minutes by a woman with a smartphone and a talent for fiction. Keisha slammed the tablet face down on the table. "I am going to kill her," she hissed. "I am going to go over there and drag her out by her hair." "No," I said. Keisha looked at me. "Daddy, we have to counter this. We need to release a statement. We need to show the medical report of your hip. We need to show the broken lock." "No statement," I said. I walked over to the kitchen island. I poured myself a glass of water. My hand was steady. The anger had burned itself out, leaving behind something colder, harder, something like tempered steel. "Statements are for people who care what the neighbors think," I said. "I do not care about the neighbors. I care about the truth." I looked at Keisha. "Open your laptop." She looked confused, but did as I asked. She booted up his rugged field computer. "Connect to the server at my firm," I said. "Use the admin override. Passcode Jericho." Keisha typed it in. "What are we looking for, Daddy? Activate camera 4, I said. Keisha stopped typing. He looked up at me. "There is no camera 4 on the house schematics. I swept that house for bugs myself 6 months ago." "I know," I said, "because I installed camera 4 myself 10 years ago. It is not on the network. It is hardwired into the dedicated line I ran for the structural integrity sensors in the master bedroom. It is behind the HVAC vent directly facing the bed." "You have a camera in the bedroom?" Keisha asked, her eyes wide. "I built that house," I said simply. "I monitored the stress loads on the support beams, and sometimes I monitor the stress loads on the marriage. Turn it on." Keisha hit the enter key. The screen flickered static for a second, and then a crisp, high-definition image filled the monitor. It was the master bedroom. My bedroom. The bed I had slept in for 18 years. Vanessa was there, but she was not crying. The tear-stained victim from the live stream was gone. In her place was a woman laughing so hard she had to hold her stomach. She was sitting on the edge of the bed holding a glass of champagne. And she was not alone. Betty was there. My mother-in-law. The woman whose medical bills I had paid. The woman I had treated like a queen. She was sitting at the vanity table, my vanity table surrounded by an array of cosmetics. "Look at this," Betty cackled, pointing at the tablet she was holding. "Look at these comments. They want to lynch him. Someone should put that old dog down. I hope he rots in jail." "Oh, this is too easy." Vanessa took a sip of champagne. "Did you see his face, Mama? When he pushed him, he looked like a crushed bug. I thought he was going to cry. He deserved it." Betty spat. "Arrogant old man, thinking he could buy us, thinking he could own us." Keisha was silent, staring at the screen in disbelief. The cruelty was raw, unfiltered. "Come here, baby," Betty said, waving a makeup brush. "You rubbed off the bruise when you were wiping your fake tears. We need to reapply it before the police come back for a wellness check." Vanessa walked over to the vanity. She sat down, tilting her head back. Betty dipped the brush into a palette of purples and yellows. With the skill of a Hollywood makeup artist, she began to paint a bruise on Vanessa's cheekbone. "Hold still," Betty muttered. "You need to look like he hit you with the back of his hand. Right there." "Yes." "That looks nasty." Vanessa looked in the mirror and smiled, a cold, predatory smile. "It is perfect. Dr. Evans will have to sign the commitment papers now. Violent outbursts, delusions, physical assault. It is a slam dunk for dementia. I watched them. I watched them paint a crime scene onto her skin. I watched them toast to my destruction. I felt a strange detachment, like I was watching a documentary about a disaster that happened to someone else. "Is the money secure?" Vanessa asked, inspecting her face. "It is moving," Betty said. "The Cayman transfer cleared an hour ago, $3 million, and once we get the power of attorney we can liquidate the real estate, the house, the building downtown, everything." "What about the boys?" Vanessa asked. Dante seemed shook. Betty scoffed. "Dante is a child. He will get over it when he sees the new car you are going to buy him. He just needs to keep his mouth shut and remember who his real family is." I leaned closer to the screen. My heart was beating slow, heavy thuds against my ribs. "I just wish we didn't have to wait." Vanessa sighed. "I am tired of playing the grieving wife. I want to spend it. I want to go to Paris. I want to be free of him." "Patience." "Honey," Betty said, finishing the bruise with a dusting of powder. "He is 75. His heart is garbage. Without his pills with this stress, he will pop a valve within a week. And if he doesn't—" She paused. She looked directly at Vanessa in the mirror. "If he doesn't die on his own, we will help him along, just like we planned." Keisha gasped. Her hand flew to his mouth, but then Betty said something else, something that froze the blood in my veins and stopped time itself. Besides, Betty said, wiping the brush on a tissue, "The old fool still thinks those two brats are his blood. He thinks he is fighting for his legacy." Betty laughed, a dry, rattling sound. "Wait until he dies. Wait until the ink is dry on the death certificate. Then we will bring Ray back. Ray has been waiting 18 years to be a father. It is time the boys knew who their real daddy is." Ray. The name hung in the air of Keisha's study like a toxic cloud. Ray. The man Keisha had found in the photos. The con artist. The ex-con. Ray was the father. I stared at the screen. I looked at the woman I had married, the woman I had slept beside, the woman who had birthed 2 sons that I had raised, loved, and educated. They were not mine. 18 years of lies, 18 years of paternity fraud, every baseball game, every graduation, every fever, every "I love you, Dad." It was all stolen. It was all a performance. My knees gave out. I sank into the chair behind me. The room spun. The grief was not sharp. It was a vast, hollow emptiness, a black hole opening up in the center of my life and swallowing everything I thought I knew. Dante, Darius, my boys. They were not my boys. They were the spawn of a grifter and a thief. Daddy, Keisha asked, his voice sounding far away. "Are you okay?" I stared at the monitor, at the 2 women laughing in my bedroom. "Who is Ray?" Keisha whispered, tears streaming down her face. I closed my eyes. I saw the faces of the twins. I saw their eyes, which I had always told myself looked like my mother's. I saw their height, which I attributed to my grandfather. I saw the deception woven into their very DNA. "Ray," I said, my voice sounding like grinding stones. "Ray is the man we are going to find." I opened my eyes. The weakness was gone. The grief was locked away in the vault. "Keisha," I said, "get the facial recognition software running. Run the photo from the park against the Georgia Department of Corrections database. Find Ray Miller. Find him tonight." "But Daddy," Keisha said, "the money, the restraining order." "Forget the money," I said. "Forget the order. This isn't about money anymore. This is about blood. They made me raise another man's sons to kill me." I stood up. I walked to the map of the city on the wall. "Find Ray," I commanded. "Because Ray is the key. Ray is the loose thread. And I am going to pull that thread until their entire tapestry unravels and chokes them to death." 2 weeks. That was the timeline the judge had given us. 14 days until the preliminary hearing, where a stranger in a black robe would decide if I lost my freedom and was committed to an institution for the rest of my life. 14 days to find a ghost named Ray Miller and drag him into the light. The clock was not just ticking, it was hammering against my skull like a rivet gun. Keisha and I set up a war room in her study. It smelled of old books and fresh coffee. We were running on adrenaline and the cold fury of the betrayed. Keisha had called in every favor she had from her days in the district attorney office. She was working the phones, her voice low and urgent, speaking a language of codes and contacts that I did not speak. I sat at a folding table reviewing the financial wreckage of my life. We hit the first wall at 9 in the morning on Wednesday. "I need to buy access to the enhanced background check database," Keisha said, typing furiously. "It is a third-party vendor, $500 to expedite the search on Ray Miller." I pulled out my wallet. It was an old leather thing molded to the shape of my hip over 20 years. I pulled out my debit card, the one connected to my primary checking account, the one I had used to buy groceries and pay bills for decades. "Use this," I said, sliding it across the table. Keisha took it. She typed in the numbers. She hit enter. She frowned. She typed it again. She hit enter again. "Daddy," she said, her voice hesitant. "It is declined. Try it again," I said. "There is over $50,000 in that account." "It is not the balance, Daddy. The account is frozen." I felt a coldness spread through my chest that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. I pulled out my phone. I logged into my banking app. Account frozen. Contact branch. Legal hold. I checked the savings. Frozen. I checked the investment portfolio. Frozen. Brad. He had moved fast. I saw the sweat beading on his forehead. I saw the way he chewed his lip. He knew exactly what this was. He was trying to trick his grieving father into signing away his life 5 minutes before his mother's funeral service. "Is this for the insurance, son?" I asked, my voice steady. "Yes, Dad," Brad lied. His voice cracked. "It just allows me to talk to the agent for you. You know, so you do not have to deal with the stress." I looked at Vanessa. She was checking her watch, tapping her foot. She looked at me with eyes that were as cold and blue as a winter sky. "Sign it, Zeke," she said. "Do not be difficult. We are doing this to help you. Help me. That is what the wolf says to the sheep before dinner." I lowered the pen. "I need a moment," I said. "We do not have a moment," Vanessa hissed. "I need a moment with my wife," I said, my voice dropping an octave into that deep rumble that used to make construction crews go silent. "I want to say goodbye before the service. Alone." His lawyer had filed an emergency motion to freeze my assets pending the competency hearing, claiming I was squandering my estate. The judge had signed it without even asking me a question. They had locked me out of my house, and now they had locked me out of my life work. I had money, but I could not buy a cup of coffee. "He is trying to starve us out," I said, staring at the red letters on the screen. "He knows investigations cost money. He knows lawyers cost money. He wants me to show up to court with empty pockets and a court-appointed attorney." "I can cover it, Daddy," Keisha said, immediately reaching for her own wallet. "I have savings." "No," I said. My voice was sharp. "I will not drag you into debt. This is my war. I will fund it." "How?" Keisha asked. "The banks are closed to you." I stood up. My hip popped, a sharp reminder of my age. I reached into my sock. I pulled out the key Clara had left me, the key to the trust. The key to the $600,000 that Brad and Vanessa did not know existed. Clara knew, I whispered. She knew they would try this. I drove to the small community bank on the edge of town, the one where Clara had set up the Jericho Trust. It was not part of the big national chains. It was quiet, private. I walked into the lobby. I asked to see the manager, Mr. Henderson. He was an old friend of Clara's, a man who understood discretion. When I explained the situation, he did not ask questions. He simply took me to the vault. I withdrew $10,000 in cash, crisp $100 bills. "Cash leaves no trail," I told Keisha when I returned. "Cash cannot be frozen by a judge who has never worked a day of hard labor in his life." Cash is the only language the world truly understands. We paid the vendor, we paid the informants, and then the information started to flow. Ray Miller. The name came up on the screen, accompanied by a mugshot that was 10 years old. He was white, 45 years old. In the photo, he had a smirk that looked like he knew a joke nobody else did. His eyes were hard, the eyes of a man who looked at people and saw targets. "Here's the history," Keisha said, scrolling through the rap sheet. "Fraud in Savannah. Identity theft in Macon. He did a 5-year stretch in state prison. Look at the dates," I said, pointing at the screen. "He was released 18 years ago," Keisha said, "right around the time Vanessa moved here. The timeline fit like a steel beam into a rivet. They knew each other. This wasn't a coincidence. This was a long game." "But where is he now?" Keisha asked. "He fell off the grid 3 years ago. No credit cards, no address." "He is here," I said. "I felt it in my bones. He is close. Vanessa is not smart enough to do this alone. She needs a handler. Or maybe she is the handler. We need to follow the money, I said. Not my money, her money. But we cannot access her accounts, Keisha said. That is illegal. It is only illegal if you get caught, I said. And right now, I do not care about the law. I care about the truth. I took $5,000 from the stack of cash. I am going to the downtown branch of First National, I said. I know a teller there, a young man named Gary. I helped his father get a job on a construction crew years ago. He handles the high net worth accounts. Vanessa Bank there. Daddy, that is bribery. Keisha warned. It is an investment, I corrected. I walked into First National an hour later. I found Gary. He looked nervous when I approached his window, but he owed me. And he liked money. I slid the envelope across the counter under a brochure for a low-interest mortgage. I need the last 6 months of statements for Vanessa Freeman, I whispered. Just the transaction history, no questions. Gary looked at the envelope. He looked at me. He saw the desperation in my eyes and the promise of the cash. He typed quickly. The printer whirred. He handed me a thick stack of papers folded inside a generic bank folder. Good to see you, Mr. Freeman, he said, his voice trembling slightly. I walked out of the bank with the smoking gun in my pocket. Back in the war room, Keisha and I spread the statements out on the table. We highlighted every suspicious transaction. There were dozens of them. Withdrawals, transfers to shell companies. But one stood out. A recurring monthly payment of $3,500. It was labeled simply Rent Management Services. It was being paid to a company called the Spire Group. I knew the Spire. I had consulted on the foundation work when they built it. It was one of the most expensive, exclusive residential towers in the city. Penthouses there went for $10,000 a month. But they had smaller luxury units too. Why is Vanessa paying rent to the Spire? Keisha asked. She lives in your old house. She is not paying for herself, I said, realizing the magnitude of the betrayal. Look at the source of funds, I said, pointing to the deposit column. These transfers into her account. They are coming from Brad's business account. Structural Dynamics, LLC. She was skimming. She was stealing from her own husband, my son, to pay for an apartment downtown. We have him, I said. We drove to the Spire. The building rose up like a needle of glass and steel piercing the gray sky. It was a monument to wealth, and inside it lived a rat. We parked down the street. We walked to the entrance. The doorman stopped us, but Keisha flashed her lawyer credentials, and I slipped him a $100 bill. We are looking for Mr. Ray Miller, I said. We have a delivery. The doorman checked his list. Miller. Apartment 402. Go on up. We took the elevator to the 4th floor. The hallway smelled of lavender and expensive cleaning products. We found door 402. I did not knock. I just listened. I heard music, jazz, Coltrane, my favorite album. I heard laughter, a man's laughter, smooth, arrogant. Keisha pulled out her phone and started recording. I reached for the door handle. It was locked. I looked at Keisha. Stand back, I said. I might be 75 years old, but I still knew how to kick a door. I aimed for the lock plate. I put all my weight and all my anger into my heel. The door flew open with a splintering crash. We burst into the apartment. It was luxurious. Leather furniture, huge television, a view of the city skyline. And there, sitting on the sofa wearing a silk robe and holding a glass of scotch, was Ray Miller. He looked exactly like the mugshot, only older and softer. He looked like a man who had been living on someone else's dime for a very long time. He jumped up, spilling his drink. "Who the hell are you?" he shouted, reaching for a phone on the coffee table. I stepped forward, blocking his path. "I am the man whose money you are spending," I said. Ray froze. He looked at me. He looked at Keisha, holding the phone. "Zeke Freeman," he whispered. "You know my name?" I said, walking closer, my cane tapping a heavy rhythm on the hardwood floor. "That is good, because I know yours, Ray, and I know who pays your rent. Vanessa." He said, his eyes darting to the door. "Vanessa," I confirmed, "my daughter-in-law. The woman who is stealing from my son to keep you in silk robes and single malt scotch." Ray tried to smile. "It was a weak, greasy thing. Look, old-timer, you got it all wrong. Vanessa and I, we are just friends. Old friends. She is helping me out. Helping you out," I repeated, looking around the opulent apartment. "With $3,000 a month of stolen money, while she tries to put me in a nursing home to cover her tracks." I looked at the table. There was a framed photo. It was recent. It showed Ray and Vanessa. They were on a boat. She was wearing a bikini. He had his arm around her. They looked like a couple. They looked like they were in love. And then I saw the date on the timestamp in the corner of the photo. It was taken last week. While I was grieving my wife, while I was being evicted from my home, Vanessa was on a boat with this grifter laughing. My rage turned cold and hard like tempered steel. "We have the bank statements, Ray," I said. "We have the photos. We have the proof." Ray's bravado crumbled. He slumped back onto the sofa. "What do you want?" he asked, his voice trembling. "You want money. I don't have any. She controls everything." "I don't want money," I said. "I have plenty of money." I leaned in close. "I want the truth, and you are going to give it to me, or I am going to call the police and tell them about the fraud, the embezzlement, and the identity theft, and you will go back to prison, Ray, and this time you will die there." Ray looked at me. He saw that I was not bluffing. He saw that the old man he thought was a victim was actually the judge, the jury, and the executioner. "Okay," he whispered. "Okay, I will tell you." I sat down in the leather chair opposite him. "Start talking," I said, "and do not skip the part about how long you two have been playing my son for a fool." Ray took a swig of his scotch. His hand was shaking. "It started a long time ago," he said, "before she even met Brad. It was always the plan, Zeke. It was always about the money." I listened, and as he spoke, the pieces of the puzzle fell into place, forming a picture so ugly, so cruel, that it broke my heart for my son, even as it hardened my resolve to destroy the woman he married. We found the ghost, and now the ghost was going to haunt them all. The Blue Velvet Lounge was the kind of place that charged $20 for a cocktail to keep the riffraff out, but the darkness inside hid the same stains you would find in a dive bar. It was 2 blocks from the Spire. We found Ray Miller in a corner booth nursing a glass of single malt scotch that was older than the twins. He was wearing a suit that looked expensive from a distance, but cheap up close, much like the man himself. Brad looked at Vanessa. She rolled her eyes but sat back. "Fine," she said. 2 minutes, then you sign." I stood up. My knees popped. I walked to the table with the urn. I placed my hand on the smooth wood. It was cold. Clara was warmth. She was laughter. She was the smell of cornbread and the sound of jazz on Sunday mornings. This box was not her. But next to the box was her Bible, the old leather-bound King James she had carried since we were married in 1970. I picked it up. The leather was soft, worn smooth by her hands. I opened it to the bookmark. It was Psalm 23, "The Lord is my shepherd." And there, tucked between the pages of the scripture, was an envelope. It was not a church bulletin. It was a letter. On the front, in Clara handwriting, it said, "For Zeke. Read this when they show their teeth." My heart stopped. Clara. My wise, beautiful Clara. She knew. She always knew. She saw things I refused to see. She saw the greed in Vanessa's eyes. She saw the weakness in Brad's spine. I walked over to the booth. My hip was a dull fire, but I walked with the rhythm of a pile driver, steady and heavy. Keisha peeled off to the side, leaning against the bar, crossing her arms, cutting off the exit. Ray looked up. He did not jump. He did not spill his drink. He just smiled, a slow, lazy curling of the lip that showed too many teeth. "Isaiah Freeman." Ray said, his voice smooth like oil on asphalt. "I was wondering when you would show up. You look terrible, old man. Rough night." I slid into the booth opposite him. The leather creaked under my weight. I placed my hands on the table, calloused engineer hands next to his manicured grifter hands. "Ray Miller," I said, "you are living well for a man with no job and a rap sheet longer than my arm." Ray swirled his scotch. "I have a benefactor, a very generous woman who appreciates my particular set of skills." I looked at him. I looked for the monster I had built in my mind, but he was just a man. A mediocre aging man with watery blue eyes and a weak chin. And yet looking at him was like looking into a distorted mirror. "I see them in you," I whispered. It was involuntary. The words escaped before I could stop them. Ray laughed. It was a soft, wet sound. "Of course you do. Dante and Darius, they are fine boys. Big, strong. They get their height from me. And that temper, that is all Miller blood." The confirmation hit me like a physical blow. I had suspected it. I had calculated the odds. But hearing him say it, hearing him claim ownership of the two human beings I had devoted the last 18 years of my life to, was an agony I cannot describe. How I asked. My voice was hollow. Vanessa is light, Ray interrupted, leaning forward. Her mother Betty is light. You know how genetics work, Zeke. You are an engineer. You understand blueprints. Vanessa and I, we fit. We matched. When she got pregnant, we knew there was a risk. The babies could have come out looking like me, or they could have come out looking like her. But you were so desperate for a legacy. You were so desperate to put your stamp on the world. You never even questioned why those boys had hazel eyes. You just told yourself it was some recessive gene from your great-grandmother. He took a sip of his drink, enjoying my pain. You saw what you wanted to see, Zeke, and we let you. I closed my eyes. I saw Dante at 6 years old crying because he struck out at T-ball. I saw myself holding him, wiping his tears, telling him that a Freeman never quits. I saw Darius at 10 showing me his science fair project, his face glowing with pride when I told him he had the mind of an engineer. I had taught them to shave. I had taught them to drive. I had paid for their braces, their tutors, their football camps. I had sat by their bedsides when they had the flu, cooling their foreheads with damp cloths, praying to a God I was not sure I believed in to spare them. I had poured my soul into vessels that belonged to another man. I was the cuckoo bird tricked into raising the predator young in my own nest. Thank you, by the way, Ray said, breaking my reverie, for raising them. I was in no position to be a father back then. I had legal entanglements. You gave them a great start. Private schools, nice clothes, and now that the heavy lifting is done, I get to step in and enjoy the finished product. You are a parasite, I said. Ray shrugged. I am a survivor. And you are a wallet that is about to be emptied. Vanessa tells me you are stubborn. She says you will not sign the papers. She says we might have to wait until your heart gives out. He looked at his watch. Tick-tock, Zeke. Tick-tock. I looked at this man, this smug, hollow man who thought he had won the lottery. He thought he was the mastermind. He thought Vanessa loved him. He thought he was the end game. He did not know Vanessa. Not the way I did. He knew the mistress. I knew the wife. I knew the woman who looked at bank balances the way other women looked at romance novels. I reached into my pocket. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a stack of photographs Keisha had printed an hour ago. I tossed them onto the table right on top of his napkin. Ray looked down. His smirk faltered. The photos were high resolution. They showed Ray outside a motel in Bankhead. He was with a woman. She was young, maybe 22. She was blonde. She was hanging off his arm laughing. So what Ray said, trying to recover his composure. I have a life. Vanessa knows I am not a monk. Does she? I asked. Does she know you are spending her allowance on this girl? Does she know you bought this girl a Honda Civic last week? We have the title Transfer Ray, signed by you, paid for by Structural Dynamics LLC. Ray stiffened. Vanessa does not care what I do as long as I play my part. I leaned in. My face was inches from his. I let him see the cold, dead anger in my eyes. You think Vanessa is loyal to you? I asked. You think a woman who spent 18 years lying to the man who gave her the world is going to be true to a man who gave her nothing but a lie? Ray swallowed. His Adam apple bobbed. Vanessa is not leaving me because she loves you, Ray, I hissed. She is leaving me because she wants the money. She wants the $3 million in the Caymans. She wants the house. She wants the freedom. And do you know what the only loose end is? I pointed a finger at his chest. You. You are the liability. You are the ex-con father who can blow up her narrative. You think she is going to share that money with you. You think she is going to let you play happy family with the twins. I reached into my pocket again and pulled out another piece of paper. It was a flight itinerary. Keisha had found it 20 minutes ago. This is a flight confirmation, I said. One way, to Paris, for 2 people. Ray snatched the paper. He scanned it. Vanessa Freeman, he read. And Dante Freeman. Darius Freeman. There is no ticket for Ray Miller, I said softly. Ray stared at the paper. His hands began to shake. She is taking the boys, I said. She is taking the money, and she is leaving the country next week. She is cutting you out, Ray, just like she cut me out. You were just a stud horse. You served your purpose. Now you are just another mouth to feed. Ray looked up. The arrogance was gone. In its place was the desperate rat-like fear of a man realizing the trap has closed around his neck. She promised me, he whispered. She said we would be a family. She promised to love, honor, and cherish me too, Ray, I said. Look how that turned out. Ray chugged the rest of his scotch. He slammed the glass down. That witch. She is playing me. She is playing everyone, I said. But she is playing you for a fool. She used my money to keep you quiet, to keep you on the hook until the boys were 18. Now they are adults. She does not need you to sign anything. She does not need your permission to take them. Ray looked at me. His eyes were wild. What do you want, Zeke? You want to kill me? Go ahead. I got nothing left. I do not want to kill you, Ray, I said. I want to buy you. Ray blinked. What? I reached into the inner pocket of my coat. I pulled out one of the gold bars. I placed it on the table. It landed with a heavy, dull thud that rattled the glass. Gold, I said. Untraceable. Liquid. Ray stared at the gold. He reached out and touched it, his fingers trembling. I have more, I said. I have enough to set you up in a country where Vanessa cannot find you. Enough to start over. Or enough to drink yourself to death in style. I do not care which. What do I have to do? Ray asked, his eyes glued to the gold. I want the truth, I said. I want it on video. I want you to sit in front of a camera and tell the world exactly what you and Vanessa did. I want you to tell them about the paternity fraud. I want you to tell them about the fake abuse allegations. I want you to tell them about the plan to drive me to a heart attack. Ray hesitated. If I do that, I go back to jail. Conspiracy. Fraud. Not if you turn state evidence, I said. My lawyer can cut a deal. Immunity for testimony. You give us Vanessa, you give us her mother, and you walk. You walk with the gold. Ray looked at the gold. He looked at the flight itinerary to Paris that did not bear his name. He looked at the photo of the young blonde he was trying to impress. He was a grifter. He had no code. He had no loyalty. He only understood leverage and profit. Vanessa had made the mistake of thinking she owned him. I knew you could only rent a man like Ray. Make it 2 bars. Ray said, his voice raspy. 2 bars and a plane ticket to Thailand. I signaled to Keisha. Keisha walked over carrying the iron lunchbox. She set it on the table and opened it. The golden glow illuminated Ray's greedy, desperate face. Done, I said. Ray reached for the box, but I slammed the lid shut on his fingers. He yelped. First, I said, leaning in close. We go to your apartment, the one my wife pays for. We set up the camera. You talk. You spill every drop of poison you have stored up for 18 years, and then and only then do you get the gold. Ray rubbed his hand. He looked at me with a mixture of fear and respect. You are a cold son of a bitch, Zeke, he said. I stood up. My hips screamed, but I did not feel it. I felt light. I felt the structural integrity of my life returning steel beam by steel beam. I learned from the best, I said. I gestured to the door. After you, Ray. We have a movie to make. I looked over my shoulder. Brad and Vanessa were arguing in hushed tones. They were not looking at me. I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten letter and a key. My dearest Zeke. The letter read, If you are reading this, it means I am gone and you are sitting in the front pew feeling like the world has ended. But the world has not ended, old man. It is just changing. I know you love our son. I love him too. But we both know he married a woman who loves things more than people. And we both know Brad is too weak to stand up to her. I have been putting money away, Zeke. For 20 years. Every time you gave me allowance for groceries, every time I sold a quilt, every time we got a tax refund. I invested it. I did not put it in our joint account because I knew Vanessa has the routing number. I opened a trust. The account is under the name Jericho LLC. There is $600,000 in there, Zeke. I almost dropped the Bible. $600,000. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the morning air crisp and cold. The kind of cold that settles deep in your bones and reminds you of every injury you have ever sustained. It was November 12th, a Tuesday. But on my calendar it had been circled in red ink for 18 years. It was the twins' 18th birthday. In the state of Georgia, 18 is the magic number. It is the threshold of adulthood. It is the day a child becomes a man in the eyes of the law. It is the day they can vote, they can enlist, and they can sign legal documents without parental consent. I sat in my rental car, a nondescript gray sedan that smelled of stale cigarettes, parked across the street from the gates of St. Jude Preparatory Academy. I had paid the tuition here for 12 years, $40,000 a year times 2 for 12 years. I had built the gymnasium. I had endowed the science wing. My name was on a brass plaque in the hallway. But today, I was trespassing. Today, I was a ghost haunting the grounds of his own investment. I looked down at my clothes. I was wearing the costume of the defeated. A stained work jacket, worn-out boots, and trousers that had seen better days. I wanted them to see me like this. I wanted to see if they looked past the fabric to find the man who had raised them. I reached into the passenger seat and touched the 2 small velvet boxes I had placed there. Inside were 2 vintage Rolex watches, my grandfather's and my own. I had planned to give them to Dante and Darius today. I had planned a dinner. I had planned a speech about responsibility and time and legacy. Now those watches felt heavy like lead weights dragging me down into a sea of regret. I saw the bell ring. A flood of young men in navy blazers and khaki pants streamed out of the brick buildings. They were laughing, shoving each other full of the boundless energy of youth. I scanned the crowd, my eyes aching. And then I saw him. Dante. He was walking with a group of friends, his head thrown back in laughter. He looked so much like, well, I used to think he looked like me when I was young. But now with the veil lifted, I saw Ray Miller. I saw the set of the shoulders. I saw the way he walked, a little too swaggering, a little too loose. I opened the car door. My hip protested, a sharp reminder of the night the police took my gun. But I ignored it. I had to try. One last time. I had to look him in the eye, man to man, and offer him a lifeline before I cut the rope. Dante, I called out. He stopped. The laughter died on his lips. He turned slowly, his friends quieting down around him. When he saw me standing there leaning on my cane, looking like a beggar, his face did not light up. It twisted. It contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated disgust. He said something to his friends, and they stepped back, forming a circle, a coliseum for our public execution. "What are you doing here?" Dante asked, his voice loud, carrying across the courtyard. "You are not supposed to be here. Mom said you were gone." I took a step forward. "I am not at the house, Dante. I am on public property. I just wanted to say happy birthday. I have something for you." I reached into my pocket for the velvet box. Dante flinched. He took a step back, his eyes wide with a performance of fear that he must have learned from his mother. "He has a weapon," Dante screamed. The air froze. Every head in the courtyard turned. Security guards, burly men I had paid Christmas bonuses to for years, started running toward us. "He is stalking me," Dante yelled, pointing a shaking finger at me. "Get away from me. You are not my father. You are not my grandfather. You are just some crazy old man." The words were like shrapnel. They tore through the last layer of my defense. "He is harassing me," Dante shouted to the approaching guards. "Get him away, mister." Freeman, one of the guards, said, slowing down as he recognized me. He looked confused, seeing the donor of the gymnasium looking like a vagrant. "Sir, you need to leave. We do not want any trouble." I looked at the guard. I looked at Dante, my grandson, the boy I had taught to ride a bike in this very parking lot. He was looking at me with hatred, not anger, hatred, and shame. He was ashamed of me because I looked poor. "Dante," I said, my voice low and steady, "I am offering you a choice. Right now. You can walk away from her lies. You can be your own man. I do not want your choice." "Old man," Dante spat. "I want you dead." A sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb, screeching to a halt. The passenger door flew open. Vanessa stepped out. She was wearing sunglasses and a fur coat, looking like a movie star in a tragedy of her own making. She did not look scared. She looked triumphant. She walked past the security guards, her heels clicking on the pavement. She walked right up to Dante and put a protective arm around him, glaring at me like a lioness defending her cub. "You are violating the peace, Isaiah," she hissed. "I have the police on speed dial." I looked at her. I looked at the son she had corrupted. "I just wanted to give them their birthday gifts," I said, holding up the boxes. "We do not want your gifts," Vanessa said. "We do not want your money." "Well, we want your money, but we do not want you." She reached into her designer bag and pulled out a document. It was legal size, crisp and white. She thrust it toward me. "Happy birthday, Zeke," she said, a cruel smile playing on her lips. The boys signed this morning, first thing, before breakfast. I took the paper. My hands were shaking just a little. I looked at the header: voluntary termination of familial rights and disavowal of lineage. I scanned the text. It was a legal declaration stating that Dante and Darius Freeman wished to sever all legal and familial ties with Ezekiel Freeman. It stated that they acknowledged they were adults and chose to dissolve any relationship with their paternal grandfather, citing irreconcilable differences and emotional distress. Signed Dante Freeman. Signed Darius Freeman. The signatures were bold, confident. They had not hesitated. They know, Vanessa whispered, leaning in close so only I could hear. They know you are cut off. They know you are living in that shack in the bottoms. I looked up at her, stunned. You told them. Of course I did, she said, laughing softly. And I told them the truth. I told them you were a sinking ship. I told them they could either go down with you or they could sign this paper and get their birthday present from me. She pointed to the parking lot. 2 brand new Range Rovers sat there wrapped in giant red bows. They chose the cars, Zeke, Vanessa said. They chose the future, not the past. They chose me. I looked at Dante. Is this true, I asked. You signed me away for a car. You sold 18 years of love for an SUV. Dante crossed his arms. He looked at the shiny new car, then back at me. At least the car works, he said. You are just broken. And Mom says you are broke. I am not going to let you drag me down to the gutter with you. Something inside me snapped. It was not a violent snap. It was a quiet, final severance. It was the sound of a cable being cut, releasing a heavy load into the deep ocean. The grief vanished. The nostalgia evaporated. The love I had held for 18 years, the love that had fueled my work, my sacrifice, my patience, it simply went out like a candle in a hurricane. I looked at the young man standing in front of me. I studied his face. I looked for my grandson. I did not find him. I found a stranger. I found a stranger who shared the DNA of a con artist and the morality of a thief. He was not my blood. The DNA test Keisha was running would prove it soon enough, but I did not need a lab report. I saw it in his eyes. He was not my grandson. He never had been. He was just a tenant I had been evicting for too long. I nodded slowly. I folded the document and placed it in my breast pocket right next to my heart. Okay, I said. Vanessa frowned. She had expected screaming. She had expected tears. She did not know what to do with acceptance. Okay, she repeated. You are right, I said. My voice was different. It was the voice I used when I fired a contractor for cutting corners. It was the voice of business. It was the voice of consequences. If you are not my family, I said, looking from Dante to Vanessa, then I do not owe you a grandfather mercy. I turned to the security guard. I am leaving. I have no business with these people. I turned my back on them. I walked to my rental car. He is crazy, Dante yelled after me, trying to regain the upper hand. He is senile. I did not look back. I got into the car. I placed the velvet boxes on the passenger seat. I would sell them tomorrow, or melt them down. It didn't matter. I started the engine and drove away from the school. I did not feel sad. I felt light. I felt unburdened. For 18 years I had been carrying the weight of a lie on my back. Now I was free. I picked up my phone and dialed Keisha. She answered on the first ring. Daddy, did you see him? I saw him, I said. And he is dead, Keisha. Dante Freeman is dead. I just met a stranger. There was a silence on the line. Keisha understood. She knew what that tone meant. It meant the mourning period was over. What do we do? Keisha asked. Execute Plan B, I said. My voice was cold, flat, efficient. Plan B, Keisha asked. Are you sure? That is the nuclear option, Daddy. That destroys everything. The reputation, the school, the social standing. There is no coming back from Plan B. I looked at the road ahead. I saw the city skyline. I saw the structures I had built. They were strong, they were honest. They stood tall because they were built on truth. Clara had been a magician. And the letter continued. It is for 4,200 Maple Drive. I bought it 3 years ago as a foreclosure. I fixed it up with my own money. It is in the trust. It is yours. It is your escape hatch. Because I know the moment I am gone, they are going to try to take the house on Oak Street. They are going to try to put you in a home. Do not let them. You are a builder, Zeke. Build a new life, and do not tell them a thing. Let them show you who they are. Love, Clara. I put the letter in my pocket. I slipped the key into my sock. I closed the Bible. I looked at the urn. Thank you, Clara, I whispered. You saved me one last time. I turned around. Brad was standing there holding the pen out like a weapon. Ready, Dad? He asked. I looked at him. I looked at the man who was willing to trick his father to please his wife. I felt a piece of my heart die, but in its place a steel beam was erected. Yes, son, I said. I am ready. I walked back to the pew. I took the papers. My family was built on a lie, and lies do not deserve to stand. Do it, I commanded. Destroy it all. Release the Ray tapes. Send the files to the district attorney. Send the files to the school board. Cut the tuition checks. Cancel the insurance. Evict the tenants. Daddy, scorch the earth. Keisha, I said, if they want to be strangers, let them live like strangers. Let them see what life is like when the bank account is closed and the only thing they have to eat is their new cars. I hung up the phone. I drove toward the highway. The sun was shining now, bright and harsh. It illuminated everything. There were no more shadows, no more secrets. I was Ezekiel Freeman. I was 75 years old, and I was about to show my daughter-in-law and her spawn exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. You starve. The courtroom smelled of floor wax and stale air, a scent I associated with bankruptcy hearings and contract disputes. Today, however, the contract in dispute was my life. I shuffled into the preliminary hearing like a man made of dust and brittle bones. I leaned heavily on my cane, letting my hand tremble just enough to be noticeable, but not enough to look theatrical. I wore a suit that was 10 years old and slightly too big for me now that the stress had carved 10 pounds off my frame. I wanted them to see a relic. I wanted them to see a man whose mind was eroding like a sandstone cliff in a gale. Vanessa sat at the plaintiff table. She looked radiant. She wore a cream-colored suit that screamed modesty but whispered money. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore no jewelry except for a small cross necklace I had never seen before. She was playing the role of the long-suffering daughter-in-law, the saint who had cared for the tyrant until she could take no more. Her lawyer Miller sat next to her, tapping his pen on a legal pad, radiating the impatience of a man who has a tea time at 3:00. Brad sat on the other side of her. He looked sick. He was sweating through his shirt. He knew what a lie tasted like, and he was choking on it, but he was too weak to spit it out. He kept glancing at me and then looking away, unable to hold the gaze of the man who had taught him how to be a man. Keisha sat next to me, my daughter, my lawyer, my shield. She was silent, still, and lethal. We had rehearsed this. She knew the script. She knew that today I had to lose the battle to win the war. All rise, the bailiff droned. Judge Harrison entered. He was a man I knew by reputation, fair but impatient. He looked over his glasses at me, and I saw pity in his eyes. That was good. Pity is a blindfold, Mr. Miller, the judge said. You may proceed with your opening regarding the competency motion and the request for emergency guardianship. Miller stood up. He buttoned his jacket. He walked to the center of the room and gestured toward me as if I were a piece of rotting furniture. Your Honor, Miller began, his voice smooth and practiced. We are here today because Mr. Ezekiel Freeman is no longer capable of managing his own affairs. His son and daughter-in-law have been forced to intervene to protect him from himself. We have reports of erratic behavior. We have evidence of him wandering into dangerous neighborhoods. We have evidence of him squandering assets, living in squalor while a perfectly good home sits empty. He paused for effect. We are asking for immediate guardianship over his person and his estate. We are asking to freeze all accounts to prevent further dissipation of the family assets. I cupped my ear and leaned toward Keisha, whispering loudly enough for the judge to hear. What did he say? Dissipation. Is that a type of medicine? Miller rolled his eyes. He sighed, a theatrical exhale meant to show the judge what he had to deal with. Spending money, Mr. Freeman, Miller said, speaking slowly as if to a child, throwing it away. I slumped back in my chair, looking confused. Throwing it away? But I built the company. I earned it. Keisha patted my arm gently. It is okay, Daddy. Let me handle it. The judge watched this interaction. He saw a confused old man being comforted by his attorney. He saw exactly what we wanted him to see. Miller called me to the stand first. I walked up slowly. I made sure my cane hit the wood floor with a hollow thud. I took the oath, my voice shaking just a little. Mr. Freeman, Miller said, leaning on the lectern, "Do you know how much money is currently in your primary checking account?" I blinked. I looked at the ceiling. I looked at my hands. "Well," I said, "Clara usually handled the books. She was good with the numbers. I just built the bridges." "Your wife has been dead for weeks, Mr. Freeman," Miller said coldly. "Do you know or do you not know?" I think there is enough for groceries," I mumbled. Miller smiled. He pulled out a piece of paper. "According to this statement, the balance is fluctuating wildly. Withdrawals of thousands of dollars in cash. Can you tell the court where that money went?" I looked at Keisha. She gave me a tiny, almost imperceptible nod. I don't recall," I said. "I lose things sometimes. My keys, my glasses. Maybe I lost it." "You lost $10,000, Miller asked, incredulous. I shrugged. "I am old, sir. Things get foggy." Miller turned to the judge. "Your Honor, this is a clear case of dementia. He cannot track his own funds. He is vulnerable to scams. He is vulnerable to exploitation." I stared at my lap. Inside, I was screaming. I knew exactly where every penny was. I knew the routing numbers. I knew the interest rates. I was an engineer. I did not lose numbers. But I had to let them think the foundation was cracking. Miller sat down looking satisfied. He thought he had just painted a masterpiece. Then he called Vanessa to the stand. She walked up, took the oath, and sat down. She looked at me for a split second, and in that glance, the mask slipped. I saw the greed. I saw the triumph. She thought she was looking at a corpse. Mrs. Freeman, Miller said, "Please tell the court about your role in the family finances and your relationship with Mr. Freeman." Vanessa took a deep breath. Her voice was soft, trembling, just the right amount. "I devoted my life to this family," she said. "When Brad and I married, Zeke was already slowing down. Clara was sick for a long time. I stepped in. I managed the household. I helped them with their bills. I made sure they were comfortable. Lies. All of it. She had never paid a bill in her life that wasn't for her own shoes. She had treated Clara with disdain. And the assets Miller asked, the house, the savings." Vanessa lifted her chin. She looked at the judge with wide, earnest eyes. "Everything they have, everything we have, it is a result of a joint effort. Brad and I worked tirelessly to support his parents. We invested our own money into the Oak Street house to keep it standing. We sacrificed our own careers to be there for them. The assets, they are really family assets, built by all of us." I watched her. I listened to the perjury flow out of her mouth like poisoned water. She was confident. She had gotten away with it for so long that she believed she was untouchable. She believed the narrative she had constructed. She believed I was the villain and she was the victim. "And Zeke's condition?" Miller asked. "It has been deteriorating for years," she said, wiping a non-existent tear. "The aggression, the forgetfulness, the paranoia. He thinks people are stealing from him. It is classic dementia. We just want to keep him safe. That is why we sold the house, to get him the care he needs." Miller sat down. He looked at the judge. "The case is clear, Your Honor." Keisha stood up. She did not take any notes with her. She walked to the lectern. She did not look aggressive. She looked curious. She looked like a lawyer who was about to ask a very simple clarifying question. "Mrs. Freeman," Keisha said, her voice level, "you stated that you have been completely honest and transparent in your handling of the family affairs. Is that correct?" "Yes," Vanessa said. "We have nothing to hide, and you stated that you and your husband have supported Zeke financially and that the assets in question are a result of mutual contribution." "Absolutely," she said. "We carried them for years." Keisha nodded slowly. She walked closer to the witness stand. "Mrs. Freeman, you are asking this court to grant you and your husband full guardianship over Ezekiel Freeman's estate. That is a position of extreme trust. It requires a fiduciary duty." "I understand that," Vanessa said, snapping a little. "I am trying to save his estate from his own madness." Keisha paused. She looked at the floor, then she looked up directly into Vanessa's eyes. "Mrs. Freeman," Keisha said, "I have one question, and I want to remind you that you are under oath and that perjury is a felony in this state." Miller stood up. "Objection. Counsel is badgering the witness. Overruled, the judge said, leaning forward. He sensed the shift in the air. He saw the steel in Keisha's spine. Keisha continued, her voice dropping, becoming intimate, deadly. Mrs. Freeman, do you affirm under oath that you have never used Ezekiel Freeman's funds, his bank accounts, or his assets for your own personal gain or for purposes unauthorized by him? The courtroom went silent. The air conditioning hummed. I watched Vanessa throat work as she swallowed. I saw the calculation behind her eyes. She was thinking about the credit cards. She was thinking about the transfers to her business. I took the pen. Vanessa smiled. It was the smile of a predator who sees the trap snap shut. I put the paper on the pew. I leaned over. I signed my name. Ezekiel T. Freeman. But my middle name is Thomas. On the paper, I signed Ezekiel F. Freeman. I changed the middle initial. In the state of Georgia, a legal document signed with an incorrect legal name on a power of attorney can be contested and voided, especially if I can prove I was under duress or grief. But more importantly, it was a test. If Brad was really handling my insurance, he would notice the error. He knew my middle name. He knew my father's name was Thomas. If he was just grabbing for power, he would not even look at the signature. I handed the paper back to Brad. He did not look at it. He folded it instantly and shoved it into his pocket. Thanks, Dad, he said, letting out a breath he had been holding. It is for the best. For the best, Vanessa echoed, patting my arm. Her touch felt like ice. The organ music swelled. She was thinking about the rent for the apartment at the Spire, but she looked at me. I was staring at the table, picking at a loose thread on my jacket, looking like I didn't know what day it was. She looked at Brad, who was staring at his shoes. She decided I was harmless. She decided she had covered her tracks. She decided that a senile old man could never trace electronic transfers. Never, Vanessa said clearly. Her voice rang out in the quiet room. I have never taken a dime that wasn't used for his care or the maintenance of the family home. Every cent is accounted for. Keisha smiled. It was a terrifying expression. It was not a smile of joy. It was the smile of a predator who has just felt the trap snap shut on the prey leg. She did not produce the bank statements from First National. She did not produce the photos of Ray Miller. She did not produce the video of Vanessa plotting in her kitchen. Not yet. That was for the trial. That was for the destruction phase. Today was just about setting the hook. Today was about getting the lie on the record. Thank you, Mrs. Freeman, Keisha said. No further questions at this time. Vanessa looked confused. She had expected a fight. She had expected Keisha to bring up specific numbers. She did not understand why the cross-examination had been so short. She stepped down from the stand and walked back to her table, smoothing her skirt, shooting a triumphant look at Miller. Miller looked confused too, but he shrugged it off. He stood up. Your Honor, given the testimony and Mr. Freeman's obvious confusion on the stand, we ask that you grant the temporary guardianship immediately. The judge looked at Keisha. Ms. Freeman, do you have any witnesses or evidence to present regarding the temporary order? Keisha looked at me. I stopped picking at my jacket. I stopped shaking. I lifted my head. I looked at the judge. My eyes were clear. The fog was gone. Your Honor, Keisha said, we do have evidence. Substantial evidence. However, given the nature of the plaintiff testimony today, specifically the categorical denial of financial impropriety, we would like to request a 48-hour continuance to authenticate certain banking records that directly contradict the sworn statements we just heard. Miller scoffed. Delay tactics, Your Honor. The old man is stalling. He just wants to stay out of the nursing home. The judge looked at Keisha. Contradict sworn statements. That is a bold claim, Counselor. It is a bold lie, Your Honor, Keisha said. The judge looked at me. I was no longer looking at the table. I was looking at Vanessa. I dropped the act. I straightened my spine. I squared my shoulders. The tremor in my hand vanished. The confusion in my eyes evaporated, replaced by the cold, hard stare of a structural engineer who has identified the critical failure point in a building and has the dynamite ready to blow it. I looked at Vanessa with absolute clarity. I let her see the intelligence she had forgotten I possessed. I let her see the memory of the man who had survived the Jim Crow South, the man who had built skyscrapers, the man who did not break. Her eyes widened. She froze. She saw the change. She saw the wolf shed the sheepskin. The blood drained from her face. She grabbed Miller's arm, her fingernails digging into his expensive suit. Miller, she whispered, her voice carrying in the silent room. Why is he looking at me like that? The judge banged his gavel. Recess, he declared. We will reconvene in 48 hours. Ms. Freeman, you better have something good. We do. Your Honor, Keisha said. I stood up. I did not use the cane. I picked it up and held it like a weapon. I buttoned my jacket. Miller was packing his briefcase, looking annoyed. Vanessa was staring at me, paralyzed by a sudden primal fear. She knew. Deep down in her gut, she knew she had missed something. She knew the check she had just written with her mouth was about to bounce. I walked past their table. I did not stop, but as I passed, I slowed down. I looked Vanessa right in the eye. She shrank back as if I were going to hit her. I did not speak. I did not have to. My eyes said everything. I caught you. I walked out of the courtroom. The heavy doors swung shut behind me with a sound like a tomb ceiling. I walked down the marble hallway, my footsteps echoing strong and steady. I had them. They were trapped in the amber of their own lies. I took out my phone. I dialed the number for the private investigator Keisha had hired to tail Ray Miller. Is everything ready? I asked. It is ready, the voice on the other end said. Good, I said. I looked back at the courtroom doors. In 48 hours, I was going to burn their world to the ground, and I was going to enjoy watching the smoke. The knock on the door of my hotel room was not a request. It was a demand. It was the sharp, rhythmic rapping of knuckles clad in heavy rings against hollow wood. I knew who it was before I checked the peephole. Only one person knocked with that specific combination of entitlement and desperation. It was Betty, my mother-in-law, or rather the architect of my misery. I opened the door. She stood there wrapped in a faux fur coat that looked like it had been skinned from a radioactive mink. Her hair was teased into a helmet of hairspray and defiance. She smelled of gin and expensive perfume, the scent of a woman who was trying to mask the rot underneath. "May I come in, Zeke?" she asked. She did not wait for an answer. She brushed past me into the room, her eyes scanning the modest furniture with a sneer. I closed the door. I leaned against it. I did not offer her a seat. I did not offer her a drink. I just watched her. "To what do I owe the pleasure, Betty?" I asked. My voice was calm. It was the calm of a man who has already planted the dynamite and is just waiting for the fuse to burn down. "We need to talk, Zeke," she said, turning to face me. "This charade has gone on long enough. That stunt in the courtroom today, the lawyer, the questions, it was cute. But it ends now." I walked over to the desk where my laptop was humming. I sat down. My hip was aching a dull throb that reminded me of the years I had spent working to pay for this woman lifestyle. "It ends when the judge says it ends, Betty," I said. "Or when you and your daughter are in handcuffs." Betty laughed. It was a dry hacking sound like a crow choking on a bone. "Handcuffs," she mocked. "You really think you can touch us? You are a senile old man with a cheap lawyer. We have the narrative, Zeke. We have the sympathy. Vanessa is the grieving wife. You are the abusive father-in-law." She walked closer to the desk. She placed her hands on the wood, leaning in until I could smell the gin on her breath. "I am here to offer you a deal," she said. "A lifeline, because I am a generous woman." I said nothing. I just looked at her. "Drop the challenge," she said. "Sign the guardianship papers. Give Vanessa the power of attorney. In exchange, we will put you in a nice facility. Not Sunset Hill, somewhere with a view, maybe even a private room. You will be taken care of. You will die in comfort." "And if I refuse?" I asked. Betty smiled. It was the smile of a shark that smells blood in the water. "If you refuse, Zeke, we go nuclear." "Nuclear," I repeated. Betty reached into her purse. She pulled out a small black notebook. She tapped it with a manicured nail. "Vanessa is prepared to testify," she said, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "She is prepared to tell the court about the incidents." "Incidents?" I asked, my curiosity piqued by the depth of their depravity. "The nights you walked into her bedroom," she said. "The times you touched her inappropriately. The times you forced yourself on her when Brad was at work." The air left the room. The silence was absolute. I stared at her. I stared at this woman who was older than me, who had gray hair and grandchildren. I stared at the monster beneath the makeup. "You are accusing me of sexual assault," I said, my voice barely a whisper, "on my own daughter-in-law." Betty shrugged. "Who will they believe, Zeke? A beautiful young woman crying on the stand, or a confused, aggressive old man with a history of dementia. We will destroy your name. We will destroy your legacy. You will not just be broke. You will be a pariah. You will die in prison branded as a pervert. I felt a wave of nausea. It was a lie so vile, so disgusting that it made my skin crawl. But I knew the power of such a lie. It was a stain that never washed out. Even if I won, the stigma would follow me to the grave. This is your leverage, I asked. This is your reality, Betty corrected. Sign the papers, Zeke. Or spend the rest of your life on the sex offender registry. I looked at her. I looked at the confidence in her eyes. She thought she had won. She thought she had found the one threat I could not withstand. She thought I would trade my fortune for my reputation. She did not know that I had already traded my reputation for the truth. I reached for the remote control on the desk. You like television, Betty? I asked. She frowned. What does that have to do with anything? I think you should watch this, I said. It is a rerun. But I think you will find the main character very compelling. I pointed the remote at the large flat screen mounted on the wall. I pressed play. The screen flickered to life. It was not a cable channel. It was a feed from a security camera. The timestamp in the corner read 3 months ago. The image was grainy but clear enough. It was a basement, low ceilings, smoke hanging in the air, green felt tables.